across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow right here on Talk. So, as you will be aware, resident doctors have begun their 5-day strike. Started at 7 a.m. this morning. 20,000 of them walking out after 83% voted in favour. This disrupts care, of course, at the worst possible time. There is a flu issue. I know there's one every year, but when it chimes with a strike, it's not a pretty picture. Just a reminder, these are the doctors that have already received in the last couple of years a 29% pay rise. Ministers are putting the cost of these strikes at around about £250 million. Simple question. Do you support the striking doctors? We'll take some calls on that shortly. Also this afternoon, the government is weighing up giving out free TV licences for benefit claimants. And of course, this comes at a time when fewer people than ever are paying the £174.50 fee, which means there are now live discussions about how the BBC can remain intact. Options include advertising, top-up subscriptions, charging for online access, monetising YouTube. Or, of course, should the corporation just simply be closed down? We'll look at that too. And a leading think tank have said that Britain needs an emergency census after a record 3.9 million influx during the Boris wave of immigration. They are warning that immigration-driven growth will strain housing, services and cohesion. Johnson's policies pushed net migration to a record 944,000 in the year to March 2023. You may remember that. Lots to come, and of course all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. 8 days to Christmas. Happy Christmas. Don't get sick today, by the way. Whatever you do, don't fall over and sprain your ankle or have an asthma attack. Avoid cutting your finger while you're carving up the sausage rolls. And whatever you do, don't pass out, feel violently sick, or, God forbid, have a heart attack. Your health service has just been compromised. The treatment you should expect may not be forthcoming. You might arrive at hospital and discover it looks more like a library. In the next 5 days, 70,000 operations and appointments are at risk. This, by the way, is the 14th walkout, the third this year. Labour, of course, had paid them up to 29% they were asking for, and now they want more. As a result, patients are being... Can you imagine the world we're in now? Patients are being told to expect disruption. Kids, it's the 21st century, and we're being told when you go to hospital, I mean, it's bad enough in one of those horrendous A&E departments as it is. It's always chock-a-block. You always think you've lucked in, don't you, if you do something, if you sprain your ankle at sort of 2:30 in the afternoon. You think, oh, that's a handy time. I'll nip down there. It'll be like a flipping ghost town in A&E. And you discover it's absolutely rammed. You think, well, who else gets injured but me at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon? There is that sense. But when we're being told as patients to try and stay away from either having an accident, getting ill, or something happening, you know you're in trouble. NHS bosses are saying they are struggling to keep up as many services going as they had done in recent walkouts. And of course, this is down mainly to the flu. Huge pressure on hospitals. Non-urgent services will be affected by the strike. And of course, there's no going back now. This is the 14th walkout by resident doctors, the new name, of course, for junior doctors, in this long-running pay dispute. Wes Streeting, he's the health secretary, said the strike has been timed in order to inflict the most damage on NHS patients and put patients at risk. But the British Medical Association, the Marxist union, said it would work with NHS bosses to ensure safety. Well, don't call a strike then, you utter cretins. If you want to ensure safety, don't go on strike. As clinicians, as doctors, as trained medics, for God's sake, don't go. What is wrong with you people? You are doctors. You sign an oath to the effect of saving lives, and you're on strike. You earn pretty good money, and that money will only ever increase. You've got gold-plated pensions, and your salary outlook is only going northwards as you progress through your medical career. They are the facts. Don't go on strike. You're putting patients' lives at risk. You're compromising the NHS. And frankly, you compromise your own integrity more than anything else. 0344 499 1000. Do you support striking doctors? And I'm bound to ask as well. There's two things that come from this. One is, are you one of those patients that's had to cancel an appointment or been told maybe don't turn up, or it could be a longer wait than usual? I mean, a longer wait than usual. I mean, usual is a very long wait, whether you're in a clinic or the A&E department. Has it specifically affected you? There is a wider question about the restructuring of our NHS, and we're talking about the BBC a little later, and the correlation between the BBC and the NHS, believe it or not just because Holby City is not the correlation, by the way. The correlation is the enormity of these organisations, the enormity, the fact they are so big, the fact that no one has ever significantly or substantially gone in and done a root and branch recalibration of how these things run. No one has ever done, not in my lifetime has anyone ever done that. They tinker around the edges. Oh, we'll do this. We'll have more managers here, less managers there. Fewer managers there, I should say. We'll alter clinics to open an hour longer every other Tuesday. There's things like that. It doesn't need that. It needs something much bigger in the NHS. It needs something absolutely groundbreaking. It needs a game changer over there at NHS HQ. Every health secretary, I don't dispute, comes into the job and they think, oh, I'm the one that can do it. And then they sit down, they get the job. I know this happened with Wes Streeting. You know, he was kind of slightly across the brief before he got in. People said, well, he's young, he's ambitious, he's realistic, he's not some mad loony lefty of the Labour Party. He's the bloke that can make it happen. And, of course, the minute you sit down there, your permanent secretary and all the big civil servants pretty much tell you, and I've spoken to previous cabinet secretaries who've said this, you sit down in the big chair and for about 10 minutes it's fantastic. You're in some historic, ornate room that, you know, previous high-profile game-changing politicians have sat in, and you're in that very chair, and your civil servants come up to you and say, oh, by the way, Secretary of State, there's something you need to know. We've got all these problems, whether it's in crime or, in this case, in the NHS. What you need to know is there's nothing you can do about it. Now, that was said to a previous Home Secretary who told me that story himself. There's nothing you can do about it. You can tinker, you can rob Peter to pay Paul, you can put a cosmetic gloss over it, but you can't substantially change it, because we retain the status quo in our institutions in this country, and we do so at our peril. That's why things are dying, things aren't working, and the whole place needs a clear out. You need to get into these areas with an industrial hoover and clear up the system. It isn't just tinkering. It's not a little bit of a mess over there or a problem over here. It is a systemic mess right across the whole structure. It's too bloody big and no one knows how to run it, and we will forever be in these kind of conversations. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this story and the other big stories of the day. Chloe Dobbs is with us, political commentator. Afternoon to you, Chloe.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Always good to have you with us. Let's start off then with this one. 7 a.m. this morning, the big 5-day strike began. It is causing absolute carnage over there at the NHS. And, of course, it chimes with the winter flu problem as well. Everybody has a view on this, including Jeremy Corbyn, who spoke this morning on Times Radio. Here's what he said.
Not funding the NHS as fully as it needs to be damages the economy as a whole. It means people wait longer for operations. It means that the sickness rate goes up. And so it's actually a good investment for everybody if we ensure that doctors and the health service are properly paid.
Why he recorded an interview on a motorbike, I've got no idea. But that was Jeremy Corbyn, Chloe, speaking this morning. I mean, it's no surprise that would be his view. It is that sort of ultra-left-wing, sort of slightly crazy view. I thought even left-wingers had got out of this. Just throw more money at it and everything will be great.
Well, I mean, that was the Labour Party's approach last year, and Wes Streeting boasted about how he had ended the damaging strikes by giving them that 28.9% pay rise. And then you know, sure enough, you give them an inch and they take a mile and they're back for more. I mean, I think it's pretty selfish after you've had the highest pay rise in the public sector to come back and ask for more. You've got a far bigger pay rise than anybody else. Yes, you can say in real terms it's not quite as high as it was in 2008, but look at how everyone else in the economy is doing. Everyone is struggling with the cost of living, and this country is bankrupt. Okay, if it's the case that we get the economy on a roll and we manage to grow the economy, get tax receipts up, and then there's a bit more cash in the pot to give them a bit more money, then fine. But now is not the time. And whilst we have to wait for that, they should be at work. As you said, Ian, they have a Hippocratic oath where they promise to save lives. But the reality is these strikes, they cost lives.
Yeah.
All these delayed operations, they cost lives. People don't get seen quick enough to deal with the issues that they have. And it is really damaging and really, really selfish. The solution is not throwing more money at them.
Indeed. And when we talk about these things, the government have already said it's going to cost about 250 million quid. They've just got to find that money from somewhere. One assumes that sort of agency doctors and all sorts of other things that have to be put into place when 20,000 people walk out of their job. We tend to talk about people going to appointments or A&E and the problems there. What we forget about are those patients that are already in hospital as well. That care is also compromised by definition.
Yes, so one of the big issues with this strike, Ian, is that you have a lot of people who are in hospital, for example, with this super flu, as they are calling it, who are ready to go home and then make space in those beds for patients that actually need them. They've estimated that there are about 13,000 people currently in the hospital who are ready to go home and need to go home to make that space. But it is those junior doctors, or resident doctors as they now call themselves, who do the medical checks to say, yes, all clear, you can go home. Because they are not there, because they're on the picket lines, that isn't happening. And that also means you've got people in hospital who are desperate to get discharged before Christmas so they can spend it with their families, and nobody's there to give the sign off to say you can go home.
Yeah.
I think it's awful to ruin people's Christmases like this just because you want a pay rise, even though you've had a way bigger pay rise than anyone else in this country has seen over the past year.
Indeed, and of course your projections for earnings going forward only go up and up and up, and these are jobs that are, in addition to a great pension, in addition to the absolute reality that your money will increase in a very impressive fashion, you also have a job for life. I mean, there's very few areas of life where you can, guarantee your employment pretty much until the day you retire. But as a medic, you can do that.
They've got so much more security than people in the private sector, and that's something to take into account. And also, I mean, talking about private sector, if you had a job in the private sector and you didn't like the pay and you'd ask your boss for a pay rise and they'd said no, you'd be told to go get another job if you don't like it. So if you don't like it, if you don't like the pay for doctors in this country, then go get a job at Bupa. Go get a job as a doctor in Australia. I know we don't want everyone to go there and for that to happen, but if you don't like it, then tough. And there is plenty of competition for the doctors' places. That's one thing that's been in the news at the moment, is the doctors asking for more priority for the English doctors over foreign doctors in that, because there is so much competition. Fine, we'll hire somebody else if you don't like it. You can go to Australia, you can go to Bupa or whatever other company you want to work for.
Fair point. Let's move to we are going to be speaking to the GP, Dean Eggett, on this very point shortly. Let's move to this one. Extraordinary story. Benefit claimants could get free TV licences under BBC reforms being considered by Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary. This is a government review that says half of poorer households are falling behind on the £174.50 fee. Let's have a listen to the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Will he guarantee that President Trump will not get a single penny from British licence fee payers?
Let me be clear. I believe in a strong and independent BBC. Some would rather the BBC didn't exist. Some of them are sitting up there. I'm not one of them. In an age of disinformation, the argument for impartial British news service is stronger than ever. And where mistakes are made, they do need to get their house in order, and the BBC must uphold the highest standards, be accountable and correct errors quickly. But I will always stand up for a strong, independent BBC.
Well, he might. Lots of people aren't, though, Chloe, because folk are dropping like droves. What's the word? Dropping like, going in their droves.
Dropping like flies.
Flies, flies, droves, drones, who knows. But certainly the refusal or the decision that many are making to not pay the licence, that subject has never been... That would have been something once upon a time you would have only whispered to someone and said, I don't pay the licence, can't be bothered. Now people say it out loud and they're very proud of the fact they do not contribute to this mandatory fee that you have to pay once a year. But now we're hearing, amidst all of the problems the BBC have got, that the Culture Secretary is considering giving a free licence to those who are not working.
This is genuinely absurd. What on earth are they thinking? There's been enough outcry about the budget, which was, coined a budget for Benefit Street. People furious that Rachel Reeves had given a budget that was for the backbenchers rather than the good of the economy and the country. There's this deep sense of unfairness in the country that those do not work live a better life than everybody else that sets their alarm and gets up to work. And then to say, oh, you can have a free TV licence as well, and those people who set their alarms every morning and go to work are going to pay for it for you, it's just another slap in the face to the British taxpayer. I don't know what they're thinking. They're right to have this review of the way the BBC is funded and think about other options like advertising and subscription services. I'm glad they've got the will to do that and look at that. But this idea, what are they thinking?
What are they thinking? Yes, I mean, it's just extraordinary that amidst all of the chaos and the problems, how does this even reach even the any other business section of the meeting over there at Culture HQ?
I don't know. I mean, it's clearly some woke Whitehall bubble who thinks that this is an amazing idea that everyone thinks
of course it is
great for social justice. And I'm sorry, but a TV is not a necessity. I don't have a TV, okay? I can watch some YouTube videos on my phone to entertain myself without having a TV. If you are helping we do have a welfare system in this country. If we are going to have that safety net to support people with the basics that are in need, that should be, food, shelter, education. You don't need a TV. That's a luxury. It's not fair for taxpayers to have to pay for that.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 million fewer people pay the licence than they did in 2020, which gives us an idea of the direction of travel. Chloe, stay with us. There's more stories still to come. We'll talk about that request or the discussion about having an emergency census to take into account the Boris wave of immigration, and the Labour MP who's demanding an ambulance for some character that's gone on hunger strike. We'll have details on that coming shortly. This is Talk. The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A lot of comment on the Hippocratic Oath that doctors sign, of course. Chris in Ottenshaw says doctors swear by the Hippocratic Oath. Are there not any sanctions for breaking this? If not, what is the point? Similarly, Matt, I've no ideological objections to strikes, but like the reasonable and open-minded Brit I am, I'll try to look at situations on their own merit. So I've concluded that resident doctors are letting everyone down, particularly themselves. And Paul says perhaps the doctor's oath should be renamed the hypocritical oath, says Paul in Southend. We'll put all of that to Dr. Dean Eggert, who we're going to speak to in around about 10 minutes' time. We've got Chloe Dobbs with us looking at the big stories of the day, including this one. The think tank Policy Exchange, Chloe, is urging an emergency 2026 census to take into account the Boris wave of migration. We're talking about 3.9 million people since that time, and they're arguing, not unreasonably, that the strain on services, housing, public services, social cohesion, etc., is absolutely vast and should be so much so we need an emergency census to be able to make sense of it.
Yes, I think that this is a really, really good idea. Now, a census normally takes place every 10 years, last one in 2021, the next one not due until 2031, which is still a long way away. And normally that's fine because the population and its makeup normally doesn't change very much across 10 years, but we have had such a rapid change with that Boris wave of immigration that I think it's time. And also, I think that on things like public services, like housing, I think we really need to have a clear assessment so we can put to bed any myths about this question of do immigrants improve the stock of housing, the provision of public services? Because when you say we've got too many people coming in, we can't house them fast enough, the devil's advocate to that is always, oh, well, no, actually, they come here and they build the houses for us. We're going to have a housing crisis if we don't have those immigrants coming in and building the houses for us. Same goes for public services. You see the NHS is too under strain. But they say, oh, but we need them. We need those doctors and nurses and carers from abroad. And so I think it will be really good for us to have something like a census to assess that, and also looking at things like integration, social cohesion. What are people's English language levels? Do we have a serious issue with people coming here and not integrating and learning our language as they should do?
Let's move to this story, Chloe. Zara Sultana, the weirdo left-wing MP, has visited Bronzefield Prison this morning, urging that hunger-striking prisoner Kazir Zahra should be transferred to hospital for urgent care, alleging the prison is refusing an ambulance. He's on a 46-day hunger strike. He, of course, is connected with allegations about Palestine action. Let's have a listen to her, the MP, speaking this morning.
Hiya, my name's Zara Sultan. I'm a Member of Parliament. I've been contacting the ambulance service all evening because Kazir Zahra needs urgent medical care, and I've been told that it is the prison that have denied an ambulance transfer for her to go to hospital. Hello?
Hiya.
Hello, did you just hear what I said?
Yes.
Can I ask that the prison immediately allow an ambulance to transfer Kazir, who's on the 46th day of her hunger strike? Hello?
I will consult with my medical team.
I understand that the medical team have given her an ECG and said that everything is fine. She requires urgent hospital attention. And I'm going to be just sitting outside until an ambulance is allowed in to transfer her to hospital. So I've just been cut off, so I will go and sit, as I just said, until they allow an ambulance in.
That's her protest, Chloe. I'm pretty sure, by the way, prison authorities, whatever you might think of an individual in jail or, sometimes the shortcomings of our system, I'm pretty sure they would call an ambulance if somebody was in requirement or in need for an ambulance. Nonetheless, Zara Sultana, that's the sort of stripe of her political colours, as it were. What are we making of this?
Well, first of all, Zara may be exaggerating the situation in order to get attention, pretending that an ambulance is desperately needed and it's being denied when actually this individual is fine and has been checked over inside. But I mean, second of all, what I think as my initial reaction to this is, why doesn't this person just eat something? Okay, if someone is starving to death and is consequently in a very scary medical situation, well, the best thing to do is actually eat some food. If you send them to hospital, what's the hospital going to say? The hospital are going to say, this person needs calories. They are dying because they have no energy and they've lost all of their fat and muscle mass as a consequence of 46 days of not eating. It's not rocket science. I don't think you need to be some kind of medical specialist to figure out that the solution to someone in this situation is eating some food. They've done this to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that I think is the answer, isn't it? I mean, to, take in some kind of liquids and you could probably address the very problem you've got. I mean, I'm no clinician, but I think that's generally how it works, isn't it?
I think I may be wrong, but the impression I am getting from Zara Sultana's coverage of this is that she wants this individual and those on hunger strike to be able to continue with their hunger strike, right? For them to basically be in hospital and be monitored whilst still starving themselves, which is ludicrous, right? If you want to do a hunger strike, I think it's stupid, but okay, fine. But if you get yourself in a precarious position, then if you want to live, you need to eat. That's the reality. You can't continue.
Yeah, you need to eat. Final one here. Met Police and Greater Manchester Police to take action on placards and chants after we've seen, not just recently, we've seen in the last couple of years, but even up until and during the day of the Sydney attacks, globalise the Intifada being a particularly troubling slogan that's written on placards, and they are looking to take action against those that are waving these around. What took them so long, Chloe?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. There's been a lot of outcry about two-tier policing. People will have mixed views on this. You'll have people who are more free speech absolutists that will say you should be able to say what you want, but we just want everyone to be treated equally, so nobody, left or right, should be arrested for their speech. I think it's a really difficult one because when we've had these terror attacks, the Jewish community have been crying out saying, what we're not looking for is just more security at synagogues. We need these chants on the streets to be addressed because we're allowing extremism to fester in this country. They're asking, can you please ban the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, which is banned in many other countries, including in the UAE. It is not here in the UK, and so there's a lot of outcry at the moment for a proper crackdown on extremism in this country, which seems to really be normalised since October 7th, and it's quite something for the Met Police and the Greater Manchester Police to come out with this after what has been clearly quite a soft-touch approach to these protests that happen every Saturday.
Indeed. Chloe, thank you very much as ever. Great to have you on. Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme, political commentator on those big stories. Anything we've touched on there, if you want to jump in, give us your views. 0344 499 1000. That's also where you will leave a voice note too. If you want to bypass the queues and get a comment in, voice notice on the same number, or you can message 87222. We'll speak to Dr. Dean Eggert in just a second, get a clinician's view on doctors' strikes. Do you support the doctors' strikes? Are you affected by the doctors' strike? And on the wider question, how do we almost redesign the NHS so it's fit for purpose and we don't end up in these crazy places where if some people take time off, there's a huge backlog and the whole thing goes back to square one again. It's a sort of snakes and ladders experience running this thing. Thoughts on all of that? 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 1:30. We are, of course, talking to the doctors' strike. The NHS warning huge effort is needed to stop frail and elderly patients being left stranded over Christmas as the 5-day BMA strike kicked in at 7 a.m. this morning. Do you support this? Is this an area you think, yep, they've got a point here, there have been pay rises? And of course, many would argue, compared to other sectors, these have been substantial. Your thoughts on this? Let's speak with Dean Eggett, GP, CEO of Doncaster Local Medical Committee. Dean, good afternoon to you. Always good to get your views on this thing, on these things. So broadly speaking, as a clinical man, as a qualified GP who's been around the block, do you support your colleagues who are downing tools?
Hi, Ian. It's nice to see you too. So I support the plight of resident doctors in their early years because the terms and conditions of being a junior doctor are pretty poor. The NHS is in a parlous state, but I don't support striking. I don't think that's the means with which to meet this end. Now, the NHS is in a terrible state. We have very few beds for patients that we have here in the UK, especially when you compare that across the rest of Europe. So hospitals pretty much all year round now are near to capacity, and we don't have surge capacity. So when it hits winter and we've got flu seasons, there's no real way to cope with patients. Yet our resident doctors do turn up to work day after day and do their very best. And the lower years of the residency, the pay is not great. So the hours are terrible, the work is hard, the pay is poor. So they do have a point, and that's partly something that the government can address. But I don't believe strike's the way to do it. Why would any doctor choose an action that will harm patients? It's something I just don't understand.
But I mean, there's a couple of points just to follow on from that. I mean, there has been a pay rise. I mean, there was a pay offer. I think if you go back to the last 2 years, something like 29%, way in excess of any other sector, police, fire service, paramedics connected to the NHS, of course. So many would not unreasonably, Dean, look at that and say, come on, I mean, 29%, how much more do you want? And if we give you another pay rise now, are you going to come back in a year's time?
You know, and I'm supportive of that too. I think the resident doctors have had a 28.9% pay increase, and they're asking for another 26%. And the issue that I have with this is the concept of resident doctors. And I really dislike the term, and I dislike the term junior doctors, because we could be talking about a doctor who's literally just qualified from medical school, and the pay at that end is extraordinarily low, quite frankly. And many junior doctors wonder whether it's worth turning up to work in the NHS to do what we do for that pay. But it's all the way up to those doctors who are almost 10 years qualified, where the pay is almost the same as a consultant, and they're all called junior or resident doctors. So to increase the pay packet for all of them doesn't really seem to make sense. So I think if we were to reframe this as increasing pay for those at the low end, where the pay is terrible, and actually not doing that for those who are at the upper end and ready to become consultants and GPs, this argument probably holds more weight. But at the moment, the concept of pay rises for all junior and resident doctors doesn't make any sense, especially when the economy is in the way that it is.
Well, right.
It's just not tenable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure junior doctors are, you know, generally speaking, above average intelligence by definition of what they do and the training they've gone through. And they may not be economists, but we can all understand the rather terrible state of the dire state of the public finances right now. Some are wondering, again, not unreasonably, Dean, the BMA, which is kind of essentially the union behind all of this, that makes, you know, a Polish union in the 1970s look like the Women's Institute by all accounts. I mean, these people have got teeth. They don't hang around over there at the BMA. Are these doctors just seduced by their overlords at the British Medical Association?
That's an interesting suggestion, and actually I do think that is part of the story, because we talk about these resident and junior doctors like they're one group, and actually they're not one group. We have the junior resident doctors who are members of the BMA, some of whom have voted to go on strike, and many of whom actually who aren't members of the BMA and have been quite removed from this. So we also need to talk about them as separate groups. We have many junior doctors who are not greedy, who are not desperate to take advantage of the taxpayer, and who just want to work and do a great job. And then we do have this faction who are quite well understood, actually, to have launched this takeover of the British Medical Association and make it into a much more radical left-wing group who are trying to essentially hold patients and the government to ransom over pay. Now, this is the 14th round of walkouts. And it makes you wonder, if they were given this 26% pay rise and they were to yet again win another pay rise, what's going to happen on walkout number 15? What's going to happen on walkout number 16? When will this end? At which point will the BMA say, enough is enough, we've got what we want for our junior doctors? And you know what, that's not the point of a union. The point of a union is to keep fighting. So I don't think if we give in, this will ever end.
I sense that too, Dean. We are getting a lot of comments on this, understandably, from concerned patients. We're all potential patients, of course. Many of the people getting in touch are currently utilising various services within the NHS. But the most common thing people are asking and raising is that of the Hippocratic Oath. Gordon here in Slough says the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, something all of you guys signed up to. He says 5-day strike, those involved remove their licences to practice medicine. The end, says Gordon. I mean, he and all the others that have raised this point about the Hippocratic Oath, where does that sit in the context of striking?
Yeah, I really like that question. I like talking about the Hippocratic Oath and reminding people actually that doctors don't take a Hippocratic Oath. It's something that seems to have come from myth. So in many medical schools now, when you qualify, there is no Hippocratic Oath. There is no statement of first do no harm. There's just the understanding of the concept of the ethics of looking after patients. And certainly, even if there was an oath that you sign up to, it's not a legally binding agreement. So for a brief moment, I just want everyone to forget the Hippocratic Oath and just think of doctors as human beings, people who turn up to work, do the best that they can and get paid. So some of those resident doctors do need to have better working conditions and better pay. Some of them don't. We need to figure out how to help those who do need better working conditions and pay to keep them. As you said earlier, they're intelligent people. They're highly competitive. Sure. And they can quite easily walk away from medicine and leave patients abandoned. I worry that many will do that. So we need to look after them at the same time as not being held to ransom.
OK. I mean, I get it. It's not like the Magna Carta, the Hippocratic Oath. You're right. Nobody comes along with a quill when you come out of St Thomas's and says, sign here, my boy. You've done very well. You're now a doctor. And everybody bows and trumpets go off, etc., and you sign on the dotted line. However, it's not just implicit but intrinsic within the job as a doctor, of course, that all of those things are a given, are they not? Do no harm. I mean, that's a given. You are there to save lives. That is drilled into you throughout the course of your training, one would assume.
You're entirely right. And this is where trade unions come in, I suppose, because when you unionise workforces, you get to act together and you have bargaining power together and you have protection behind that acting together and bargaining power that is protected in law. So doctors who are employed are also protected by the laws that bind unions together. So the Conservatives are now talking about were they to get back into government and they would ban doctors from striking. So that would take away the doctors' right to be able to have that collective bargaining power that might harm patients. And there is a big debate over whether or not strikes do harm patients. And I'm one who believes that they do harm patients. So when you look at the data, we don't see, for example, a large number of patients going into hospital and dying during strike days. And that's simply because mitigations are taking place. You've got consultants coming into work, you've got locums coming into work, and you cancel appointments. Yeah. So you can say, well, there's no increase in the deaths. But actually the harm is not necessarily from the increase in deaths. What we have is an expansion of waiting lists by well over 1.5 million patients, all of whom are struggling with their health, who will be left to languish in pain and fear. And that, to me, is harm. So, yes, you're right. A doctor should first do no harm. So I would like my colleagues to consider that when considering strikes and think about other actions in which they can improve their pay and conditions.
I mentioned St Thomas's Hospital, of course, very famous hospital in the capital, just on the south side of Westminster Bridge. There it sits, does incredible work there. We thought this morning, bearing in mind that this strike was going ahead, we'd send a bit of a camera crew down there just to sort of get the scene and a sense of what was happening. There was a bit of a debate, apparently, with the tech team. Do we send 2 cameras, one to get the doctors sort of parading across the bridge as they get to the entrance, and then one where we can speak to individual clinicians? So the team went down there and had a little look. No one was there, Dean. There were no doctors, no placards. It was a strike sans strikers.
I'm happily surprised by that. And I'd like to think that that's because the resident doctors at that trust chose not to strike and chose to go to work.
Apparently there were about 20 turned up later, but not at 7 a.m.
Well, it depends what time their shift starts. I suppose if the shift starts at 9 a.m, they're not necessarily going to turn up to strike at 7 a.m.
And there's apparently a 12 o'clock cut-off as well, so you don't have to strike after 12. So, I mean, they're fairly casual arrangement for a big strike.
Yeah, which is really what it shouldn't be, should it?
Arthur Scargill would be turning in his grave at this idea.
Well, and look
I
how
think
it
he's still
turned out
alive.
for the miners. Look how it turned out for the miners. I don't recall anybody looking back on fondly on the mining days and saying the miners really won that and it was really wonderful for their industry and they got wonderful pay rises. Actually, when you look back through history, strikes only work by incremental action of going time and time and time again and getting small wins. And that comes back to the point I was making earlier. We're on strike number 14. If they get a little win from this, we'll be looking to strike number 15 and strike number 16.
Yeah. On that point, Dean, thank you very much indeed. Very honest stuff from Dean Eggert, GP, CEO of Doncaster Local Medical Committee. It's all over the place, this. It doesn't seem to be, there's no kind of, doesn't seem to be a sort of consistent. I mentioned Arthur Scargill, by the way, he's still very much alive, by the way. I think he's coming into his 90th year or something like that. Now, when the miners' strike was happening, the miners' strike actually gets more interesting. It's almost more interesting to view it today than at the time. And the damage and the destruction and the lives and everything that were kind of wrecked by this, whatever the understanding of why it took place to begin. It was very defined almost. You kind of could work out. You didn't have to take a side necessarily, but you could sort of work it out. And with this, I don't think you can. There isn't a sense. If Arthur Scargill had called a strike, I promise you, thousands of miners turned up at the collieries, right across the country from the southeast to the northwest. There were pickets all over the show. Down there at St Thomas's, really wasn't much at all. No action at 7 a.m. And the strikers can knock off at 12 o'clock. I mean, what kind of... I don't know what sort of protest that is and how strongly some of these people feel, other than going along with the flow of what the BMA have told them to do. Let's speak to Nick in London on this point. Nick, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian. Poor old Arthur. He'd be turning in his non-grave.
In his non-grave, yes. Yeah. I mean, he's a ripe old age these days. I don't know what he does. Probably plays a lot of crib or something.
I imagine so. What I don't get about this is the BMA are talking about fairness. Well, medicine is a branch of science, and science doesn't care about feelings.
Yeah.
Science is fact, 2 and 2 equals 4, and so on. The fact remains the country doesn't have the money to pay people what they want, because we are several squillions in debt, whatever it is this week, but it's a shed load of money. We're having to stop pensioners getting the winter fuel allowance, inheritance tax changes, VAT on school fees. We're doing all these things because the country is skint. So just coming along and saying, no, it's not fair, it's like some whiny child. It's not fair, Daddy, it's not fair. Well, grow up, grow a set. I wouldn't mind so much if the BMA said, well, this money in the NHS could be better used on this, that and the other, and that might include their pay. But they never do. They always come back and they always want the taxpayer, the government, a.k.a. the taxpayer, to pay them more money. We haven't got it. We're borrowing billions yearly, which our children and grandchildren will be repaying because some BMA doctors are whining it's not fair.
I mean, is there not a point, even, whatever the kind of finer arguments are, and I know it's not perfect, and you can look at other countries and say whether they do, they have a better setup for doctors of this grade, etc. And maybe they do, and I'm sure there's some countries that have an inferior setup. But the reality is, you've just got to ask yourself one question: can this country afford to give somebody a 20-odd% pay rise? And the answer is no, right? That's the end of the argument, really.
Yeah. It is.
Whatever, even if morally or ethically, of course we'd like to pay doctors more. I'd like to pay police officers more.
I'd take it further. We can afford such and such for the NHS. We can afford such and such for the police, for defence, and so on and so forth. And those in charge, you spend that wisely. Don't go spatting it up the wall on this, that and the other.
Correct.
Do the essentials. Don't do the inessentials. And it seems to me, the work I do with the NHS, I'm a consultant, not a medical consultant, You just see across the public sector money being spat up the wall.
On a regular basis, yeah. Here's a little factoid to finish on, Nick. Back to Arthur Scargill.
Oh, yeah?
His daughter. Do you know what his daughter does for a living? She's a
interior designer.
She's a doctor. What about that? She's a doctor.
Fantastic. He must be so proud.
It's all kicking off at the Scargill house. She's a doctor who married a miner. Well, a colliery manager, so I guess the same thing. Love it. Nick, we went down a Scargill rabbit hole there. Nick, thank you very much indeed. We're also asking the question, your memories of Arthur Scargill. 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. This is Talk. The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stephen in Belfast says, this is how the NHS grift goes. Make sure all NHS staff stroke union members know that there is an unofficial go slow. Can't be too efficient. Number 2, always claim that there is a crisis and you need more staff and more money. Number 3, the new doctors and nurses that join because of the crisis become union members. And number 4, those new members of the NHS and the union are told, wait for it, there's an unofficial go slow. And so it continues, rinse and repeat every single winter. Something is wrong. And until we start looking at our NHS, the National Health Service, as a service rather than a religion or some kind of charity. We pay into it, by the way. We pay for it. It costs an arm and a leg. This idea that it's free is just simply, and very easy to show, not true. And until we take a very different view. In France, in France they look at their health service like they look at their transport service. They expect it, it's meant to run on time, it's meant to work, it's meant to be efficient. They don't glorify those involved. I'm sure if someone saves your nan's life, you thank them very much indeed and you're eternally grateful for it, of course you are. But they don't see it in the same kind of way. They don't bang pots and pans for people doing their job who are paid handsomely for doing their job. Let's speak to Matthew in Cheshire on this point of the doctor's strike. Are you a supporter, Matthew? Good afternoon.
I certainly am not. There's no way.
Okay.
Greedy so-and-sos. You know what, right?
It's a very polite way to put it, isn't it? Greedy so-and-sos.
Do you know what? If anyone is found to have lost their lives through the strike action, the BMI should be prosecuted for corporate manslaughter. That's how I see it. There's no way. I can understand you having a grievance about your paying conditions. We all have. But when you listen to them, I've listened to them talk on your shows, and they're so righteous. And they go on about that they only get so much per hour, but they look at that hour as over 24 hours, not over a 12-hour shift.
Yeah.
Their hourly rate. It's just, and when you, I think.
And they've got all sorts of different inflationary marks they look at.
Yeah, it's all souped up numbers and trying to confuse you. At the end of the day, they're on a good whack. They know what they're getting into. When I joined the army, I knew the pay wasn't great, the conditions weren't great, but I went and did what I did. And when you become a doctor or you work in the NHS, you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, this is no surprise. The predicament many of these people find themselves in is not something they couldn't have established before they became a doctor.
No, but most of them are becoming doctors. The parents have been doctors or worked in, consultants and that, so they know exactly what they're going in. And to become a doctor, you must have gone to university. You must have had a good education.
Yeah.
There's not many people come off the local council secondary school that become brain surgeons, and I don't mean that derogatory because, in general, these people are privileged and they've had a privileged lifestyle.
How often do you speak to a doctor and you discover their parents were doctors? I mean, it's so common that, isn't it? It's almost as night follows day.
Yeah, and certain communities, if you speak to an Indian community, they want their children. They don't want their children to be footballers. They want their children to be doctors or
footballers or actors, doctors or top lawyers.
Chemists. Yeah, and rightly so. My daughter, she's 16. She wants to become a midwife, and I was absolutely made up.
Fantastic.
And there's not many. She knows what her career is. She knows what she wants to do.
Yeah.
And she will earn a good money. And I say to her, be your own woman. Don't rely on a man, and you'll have a good career. And that's what.
Don't rely on a man. That's the best advice we're going to hear this afternoon, I think, Matthew. I would tell anyone not to rely on a man.
No, we're awful. My wife thinks I'm horrible.
Well, we think you're great.
No, but you do want your best for your kids, and everyone should get. We all. If the times are hard, everyone's getting nailed on. You hear Starmer saying he's giving 150 quid off your gas bill, and you're getting free trains. Well, what's 150 quid off your gas bill? What's I don't get the train. Occasionally, it's a bit of a privilege to get the train to Manchester and buy it.
Most people don't get the train. That's the funny thing.
When you do want to get it at the weekend, it's all bus services because they're working on
Because they're working on the tracks. Love it. Matthew, what a great call. Thank you, Matthew. Always lovely to have you on. This comes from Gary, who says, if we accept the BMA's argument that the RPI should be applied to resident doctors' pay to restore it in real terms to what it was in 2008, then we have to accept that everybody else deserves the same. So I did some research, says Gary, and worked out that the average salary in the UK would have to go up to 48,000 from 38,000 that it currently is to get the rest of us back to 2008 pay levels, which would make this country massively uncompetitive in global markets, crushing our economy and ushering in double-digit inflation, which in turn would lead to unions demanding even bigger pay rises. There you go. I just explained why socialism doesn't work, and brilliantly so. Gary, thank you for the number crunching too. Kevin is in Wiltshire. What do you got for us, Kevin? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. It's just the same with all unions. I think all pay rises should not be percentage-based. It's ridiculous. If you've got a doctor on 100 grand a year, he's now pushing for 29% to boost his wages to 129,000 a year.
Yeah.
Whereas the poor guy at the bottom, who's, say, on 30,000 a year, 29% of his wages is less than 10,000 a year. So surely there should be a cut-off point when you earn above 60,000 per annum per year. You shouldn't then benefit from percentage wage pay rises, because the higher your base figure is always going to be better off all the time, aren't you?
Well, indeed, and I don't know about anybody else, but I've never worked, this inflation-linked thing. I've, always been self-employed all my life, and I don't really understand. I know that things go up, things go down. Companies you work for have a good positive period, then they might have a difficult time during a recession. So that there are no pay rises that year because of course things still go up in price. I've never kind of expected an automatic pay rise based on inflation. You just have to be a bit realistic, don't you?
Well, absolutely. I've been self-employed all my life, but this percentage rate is crippling because, You know, you're on 100 grand now. They're going to get potentially another 29,000.
Well, yeah, exactly that. I mean, the percentage game you can play, but if you're already on 100 grand,
yeah,
I think you have to kind of forget the percentage thing.
Well, then they could then sit there and say, well, actually, I'm comfortable. My way of life, you know, I'm comfortable with this 100 grand. I'll put that 29 grand a year into my pension pot, and then the employer has to match it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, that's what's happening. You know, that literally is happening. I know everything's relative, and you know, when you earn 100 grand a year, it doesn't feel like the 100 grand you thought it was going to be when you only dreamed of earning 100 grand. You know, there's all of those things, and you know, people live to their means regardless. I understand all of that, and of course, things are still expensive, and 100 grand a year, we should add, is not what it was 10 years ago. You know, it's for many people that is now a standard wage, and they can still struggle. However, realistically, if you're on 100 grand a year, you're never going to starve. You're never going to struggle to heat your home, are you?
I mean, it's a struggle to pay. You know, to waste £2,000 a week every week. It's pretty bloody hard, to be honest, unless you've got serious addiction problems.
There it is. Kevin, thank you very much indeed for that. Kevin in Wiltshire. This one from Tim, who says, Tim's in Suffolk, NHS doctor recruitment needs to follow the military model. We'll train you, you pay accommodation, we'll give you a workplace, good salary, but you sign on for 6, 9, 12, 22 years, whatever. There is no striking allowed. Fair point as well. Neil in Salisbury says, I encountered Arthur Scargill in numerous occasions in the mid-80s while in hotel management in South Wales. In the mid-90s, occasionally joining him for dinner when he was on his own. His politics were completely at odds with mine, but he believed in his cause, and I have to say, was excellent company and always stood his ground. When I was about... Thank you, Neil. That's a great story. We randomly ended up talking about Scargill. Well, not so randomly. We were talking about striking. When I was about 15... I bumped into him in the BBC reception in London because I nipped in to see what it was all about. And he was there, so I asked for his autograph. Warranted Arthur. It's hardly up there with Elvis Presley. I'm not going to go on the Antiques Roadshow with that one, am I? Oh, look, Arthur Scargill. Yeah, bring us Elvis Presley and the Beatles. It might be worth something. But he was a really nice bloke. I remember that, and very polite. And probably thought, who is this 15-year-old kid with a southern accent asking for my autograph? Totally bizarre. Thank you, Neil, for that. 0344 499 1000. You can voice note us on that number as well. We're going to take the news headlines now at 2 o'clock. Back after this. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. As you well know, resident doctors have begun their 5-day strike. Happened at 7 a.m. this morning, 20,000 of them walking out, 83% voted in favour. It's disrupting care. And, of course, it comes against the backdrop of superflu, which is already causing some jip over there at the NHS. Just a reminder, by the way, these doctors have already received a whopping 29% pay rise. Ministers are putting the cost of this strikes at around about £250 million. Do you support the doctors? Also this afternoon, the Met Police and Greater Manchester Police have said in a joint statement they will toughen up on policing after the Australian Hanukkah and Heaton Park attacks. Arrests may follow for those who are chanting things like "globalise the intifada." Protest conditions will apply near synagogues and patrols, and investigations are being intensified. This aim is to protect Jewish communities while upholding lawful protest, and we all kind of understand that bit. And a leading think tank have said that Britain needs an emergency census after a record 3.9 million came in during the Boris wave of immigration. They warn that immigration-driven growth will put a strain on housing, services, and, of course, crucially, cohesion, which we've always argued is top of the list in this respect. Johnson's policies push net migration to a record 944,000 in just 1 year. Remember that. Details to come. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Mark says Scargill memories, Ian. His hair. It was a cross between a dead squirrel and shredded wheat. It was a curious hair thing, wasn't it? I think it was... He'd take that. He was just an absolute archetypal campaigning union man. There's no... Oh, by the way, if you're just tuning in, he's not died or anything. We're not doing a eulogy to Arthur. We are merely comparing the authenticity of a Scargill-type strike to the current doctors' strike, where it appears hardly any show up on a picket line, and there's no placards, and there's certainly no one chanting with the absolute enthusiasm that Scargill did when he was selling his cause and his problems with the government. And V from Glasgow, this is really interesting. As a senior medical student from a working class nursing background, about to embark on a foundation programme, I supported the initial pay rise. It was overdue and justified, but this next round of strikes crosses a line. It's no longer about fairness, it's about greed. Many of us don't come from wealth, and these demands feel ostentatious, unethical, and detached from the reality that patients face. Thank you for that, V. And that's enlightening for a couple of reasons. And to me, what jumps out whenever I hear the word working class, coming from that background myself, and going into professions where it's largely absolutely crammed with I mean, what percentage would V be in terms of medical students from a working class background? I would probably argue less than 5%. I think we'd be on firm ground, and that might even be generous. So that's a separate issue as well. How do you get more working class kids aspiring in that area, as long as you've got the qualifications, of course, but many kids do from those backgrounds, some really bright kids, but because of the sort of way that society is kind of constructed, there's no barrier to it, by the way, but there's simultaneously not a lot of encouragement to it either. People like us, people like you, it's that kind of mantra that weaves its way around working class life, arguably better than it used to be, but it's not gone away. 0344 499 1000. Let's move then to the BBC. Benefit claimants could get free BBC TV licences under reforms being considered by the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy. You did hear that correctly. Benefit claimants could get free TV licences. This is a government review that says over half of poorer households fall behind on the £174.50 annual fee. I think the conversation is actually greater than just those on benefits. And if you've got diddly, I think having to conjure up 175 quid is probably troubling, which begs the argument as to why anybody should be coughing up 175 quid for a TV service that is pretty much provided elsewhere, and either for free or your choice to pay for it. Let's speak with Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director at Defund the BBC. Afternoon to you, Rebecca. I said at the beginning of the programme, when it comes to the BBC and this subject, which never fully gone away, but it's certainly intensified in the last couple of years, Panorama and all sorts of other scandals, etc. So the conversation about how do we fund the BBC then becomes a live discussion. Obviously, advertising is one of the suggestions, top-up subscriptions, charging for online access, monetising YouTube. They seem to be the common ideas that are on the table. Of course, there is another one, and that's just to scrap the BBC. I guess there's also that. What is your take on where the BBC should be going? Because we can all agree we are no longer in a place where anyone could, with a straight face, defend its existence in the current form, at least.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the main thing, coming back to the story that sort of has launched this conversation, is that giving away free TV licenses to people on benefits isn't going to stop the bullying and criminalisation of vulnerable people. It just shifts those costs onto hard-working families. As you're talking about working class people here, and there are a lot of working class people who aren't on benefits. That's to many good working class people. It's absolutely abhorrent to rely on taxpayers in that way. And it would be them that just about managing families who would be having to shoulder the additional costs, which is just going backwards. So I have to hope that the government doesn't go down this road and rather just scraps the TV licence altogether and certainly decriminalises it, rather than prosecuting people who are struggling under the cost of living crisis. Yeah, absolutely. I said at the beginning there, Rebecca, it can't carry on, can it? There's no way, the main link people have to retaining the BBC in its current form is merely a romantic notion. I went through a few years of that, when I was thinking back to being a kid and the Generation Game and Doctor Who and Parkinson and Starsky and Hutch on a Saturday night. It was that Blue Peter in the week as a kid. Tom and Jerry was on the telly. Saturday Superstore with Noah Led. All of that stuff. So, but that's not an argument at all any longer. It's lovely to look back on those days, and they were fantastic. We only had 3 or 4 channels back then anyway. But now, in the kind of sea of choice, it's very hard to say, right, this is what we're charging, and if you don't pay it, you could have a criminal record. Absolutely. And as you say there, the whole media landscape has changed now. We've got so many different platforms we can choose to subscribe to or watch for free. You can watch ITV on demand for free because it's got advertising. There are so many things that you can watch. And so for the BBC to keep holding to this sort of golden era of public service broadcasting, it's just completely wrong, because actually what it was supposed to do, in fact, what it's legally obliged to do, is to deliver unbiased, impartial, truly representative content broadcasting, and it doesn't. And we've seen over recent weeks and months how awful the BBC has been, with its portrayal of Donald Trump and of the issue in Israel. And so it's certainly not delivering on that. And so we can wave goodbye to that sort of rose-tinted glasses view of the past and sort of say, look, we're not living in that time now. Yeah. Young people certainly don't watch live broadcast TV. They're not signing up for TV licenses anytime soon, and so the BBC has to get on board with the new landscape.
Well, yes, that's just a reality. But what bothers me, Rebecca, when I look at, and I'm thinking particularly in radio, we were talking about the NHS in the first hour. We're still talking about the NHS as well. But similar with large institutions, this is where problems set in when they're so big. And different bosses come in and different politicians come in. And what they do is tinker a little bit. We'll get more value for money in this department. But nobody ever substantially changes anything. It just sort of retains and carries on and plods along, and this sort of like a dinosaur taking its last breath before inevitable extinction. They just continue. And the BBC is very much like that. And of course, it needs a wholesale change. However, in the same time we've been discussing this, they also expand in many other areas. I mean, their radio arm is ridiculous. Radio 1 have got about 6 stations attached to it. I think Radio 2, it was the most listened to radio station in Europe, I think, has also now got these sort of smaller satellite stations on digital that you can listen to, that also nip into the territory of some commercial stations, but clearly cost a lot of money for the taxpayer. I don't know why they've got no business doing this.
Absolutely, and it is this sort of desperate sort of grasp and a monopoly over basically the sort of news cycle and the consciousness of the British people as well. It's kind of like they want to keep ownership over that in order to justify the licence fee, and they absolutely shouldn't have had that overreach into local radio. But also another example of that is with podcasts. Why does the BBC need any podcasts whatsoever? They don't. Podcasts are for people who can't afford, they're not part of a broadcaster. It's essentially so that people can get, their messaging out there, talk about interesting conversations, but they aren't a broadcaster. And the BBC just immediately sees, oh, well, this is an opportunity for us. We've got all this extra money. We can just, outreach into that and dominate that area as well. Yeah. So I absolutely agree with you. It needs to be completely scaled back if it's to be kept at all.
Rebecca, thank you. Rebecca Ryan, Campaign Director for Defund the BBC. And if you look at that area, the podcast thing is interesting because they've done their best to try and be more relevant in the 21st century. And clearly someone's thought, right, let's go down the podcast route, while simultaneously expanding their radio route. Now, I'm sure there are people who work at Radio 3 or 4 or something who might be listening to this thinking, what are you talking about? We've had our budgets cut to the bone. We've got half the staff we used to have. And I've told this story before. I remember years ago I did a couple of things on the BBC on a weekend. I would do on 5 Live or whatever it's called, Radio 5 these days. I used to go to BBC Television Centre and do the newspaper review on the news channel at like 10 o'clock. Then I would run upstairs to a studio and do Stephen Nolan's review at like 11 o'clock or something. And I remember turning up this was in White City, turning up at the BBC, and I was met, as always happened, you turn up, you give your name, somebody comes down to meet you. And this producer said to me, she said, can I just apologise firstly before we go up? This is up to the main newsroom. Before we go up, we're really short of staff. And so, it might mean that people are running around a little bit more, a bit panicked. I'm really sorry. And you've probably seen those images on the telly of the BBC newsroom. It's like an aircraft hangar, this thing. And I go up into the BBC newsroom, and I distinctly remember walking behind Fiona Bruce, who just read the 10 o'clock news. So she's walking down the corridor, and me and this producer are walking behind her, and I'm thinking, oh, here comes poor old Fiona. She's just done the news. And she probably had to write it all herself, and she might have even been working the camera from what this woman's telling me. And she opens this door, which is to the main newsroom. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Munich Beer Festival, but it's like when you walk in, there's this noise just suddenly hits you. And it was like there were thousands of them in there. And the producer looked at me and went, see what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about? See what you mean? How many people do you need to put the news on? There were quite literally hundreds of people still. And I know their work, some are at the World Service, some are doing radio, some to... This was their idea of being short of staff, and I couldn't get my head around it. Having worked in the commercial sector all of my life, the idea that this represented a problem was extraordinary. But that's their normality, so they genuinely saw it in that kind of way. And so you can do very simple things to cut... I genuinely believe I could halve the TV licence if they hired me over there at BBC HQ and said, right, save the money. I could halve the TV licence without anyone dying. Nobody would die. Nobody would notice any real tangible difference. Some things would have to go. Mr. Tumble, I'm sorry. You had a good run on CBeebies, but time is up. That dancing show, well, we'd probably keep that. They got a couple of bangers going on over there at the BBC. There's no doubt about that. The Attenborough stuff and God knows what else. But there's a lot of other kind of guff that goes with that, and way too much of it. And frankly, the radio aspect is a crime scene in terms of wasting public money. Let's go to Chris in Epsom on TV licences. Chris, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, mate. Just listening to you before, actually, talking about Scargill.
Yeah.
You forgot to mention Red Robbo.
Do you know what? I thought of Red Robbo when I read out the message from the student doctor, a senior medical student, who said she comes from a working class background. He kind of predates me, Red Robbo, but I remember seeing a documentary where he was talking about, he was going around a housing estate somewhere and he was pointing to these sort of tower blocks and going, in these tower blocks lurks, the best medic, the best racing driver, the best this, but they will never ever get to realise their dreams because they've been raised almost in the wrong class.
Yeah, well, that's wrong.
Is he still alive, this Red Robbo fella?
I don't know, but that was completely wrong. Look at Lewis Hamilton, because his father put everything into it. They were just a normal family, and struggled to get him through karting and everything else.
Right.
And because he had some skill, he was picked up at an early age by McLaren. But Red Robbo holds the unofficial world record for calling strikes in 1 year during the last real Labour lot, during the winter of discontent.
Right.
He called, how many strikes do you think he called in 1 year?
Go on.
290.
290 in a year.
That's why we haven't got. That's why British Leyland and Austin Rover and all that didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I've just got some info here on this, Chris. He had 523 walkouts at the Birmingham car plant in 30 months. This fella just blew a whistle and they all came out, right?
Listen, mate, my father, bless him, he passed now, rest in peace. But when I was a young boy, he was a precision toolmaker for the military linked helicopters. And if you wanted to set him off, because he worked on the shop floor, all right, and they'd made him the foreman.
Yep.
If you mention Red Robbo, you get a torrent coming back at you, because it was the bane of his life. Because everybody in the plant would say to him, well, Red Robbo's gone out.
I mean, it's kind of weird. He was a member of the Communist Party, of course. So, this guy, there was no... He wasn't trying to dress it up as something that it was. He was, and fair play to the, we live in a democracy. I mean, it's because of that kind of thinking that, Labour, as it once was, have been consigned to the dustbin. But, I sort of always admire people who want to give it both barrels. And I'm pretty sure Red Robbo and Margaret Thatcher probably had something curious in common.
Well, well, Thatcher was the Prime Minister that made me and my friends of my age. She told us, go out, start a business, work hard, put the hours in, and you'll keep more of your money. And we did.
Yeah, it was basically that, wasn't it? I mean, she didn't. Yeah, she wasn't pretending to reinvent the wheel.
Mondeo man.
Mondeo man. Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
BBC.
BBC. Come on, Chris. Do you want to keep it? Do you want to remodel it or refinance it in a way that works?
There's certain things of it that should be kept. The World Service, that's listened to the world over for straight information, and I believe that doesn't have the taint of the BBC newsroom and Panorama and all the other crap that's been going on. I'm just at a loss. Nandy going to give, even thinking about giving licences away. They took away the heating for the old age pensioners. My mum lost her heating allowance because she doesn't get pension credit. She's slightly above. Mum and Dad worked hard all their lives.
Yep.
She's got a private pension. She's only slightly above what the level of where you can get pension credit. So she gets none of the other benefits that go along with that. So she lost the heating. She lost the TV licence. She's 89 years old. She's bedridden with Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia, which is the lightest of the dementias, thank God. But I had to buy a TV licence for her.
Wow.
because they don't give it to her.
She'd have had the boys would have been round, wouldn't they, knocking on the door saying, you know, where's your paperwork?
I can tell you now, because of her dementia, I'm going to cancel the TV licence, and I'm going to get her to watch a streaming service only. I'll get her to watch the films.
Yeah.
Because to be honest with you,
and she'll probably enjoy every moment of it as well.
Yeah, I know. The ridiculous. The BBC have got themselves to blame for all of this.
Yeah.
There's nobody gone after them unreasonably. The two plants in the Question Time show the other night with Zia Youssef. They
weren't plants, by the way. They were just invited because they were migrants.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they were doing a programme about migrants.
Well,
I mean, I would be firing the producer if they didn't invite two migrants on a show about migrants.
Oh, I'll give you that.
Anyway.
I'll let you that. It's the cut and shut job.
Yeah, it's by the way, it's an awful programme, I have to say. I mean, I stopped watching Question Time about 10 years ago, and I agree. I'm totally with you, Chris. You can go through it. When the BBC do something really good, they do it exceptionally good. But unfortunately, that list is getting shorter by the day. Chris, I've got to move. Great call as ever. Thank you, Chris in Epsom. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes from Sarah in Cheshire, who says, back in the 80s, during the miners' strike, we had a budgie who learnt to say Arthur Scargill, as his name was used so often during news bulletins. Our parrot once escaped and was at the top of a tree shouting his name. That is just hilarious. Brilliant. Sarah, thank you for that. Let's go to Matt in Cheshire. Reference doctor strikes. Matt, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Hi, very good afternoon, Ian. Obviously, I don't support the doctor strikes at all, and I think it's irresponsible and cruel. As we know, the middle and upper class management section of the NHS is more or less an arm of the Labour Party. And I just did a quick Google of the BMA before I rang.
Yeah.
And they're pro-trans, there's a pro-Black Lives Matter post there. They're obviously pro-everything that all the left-wing extremists are who support Labour and the Green Party. So these people who are striking, they don't give a damn about dying pensioners or anything like that. They're all extremists. They're obviously pro-Palestine as well. So the fact that these people are even involved in the medical profession is almost dangerous to think about in the first place.
It's kind of interesting that the teeth of this this union, I don't know if they're not officially called a union, are they? It's an association, an organisation, umbrella group, whatever they are. But the teeth they have kind of grown out of all proportion in the last 5 years, Matt. I mean, they've always been there, of course. This was the very organisation that opposed the beginning of the NHS. People forget that. They were so radical, even then, back in the 40s.
Yeah, you wouldn't imagine that such people in such positions of responsibility would be allowed to support these kind of things so openly and so biasly. You would imagine that, if you did, it would be kept at home.
Yeah.
Just imagine if these people were Tories and they were out on strike, and just imagine if it was the Tories that maybe potentially be leading to death, and people on good, decent wages, above the average wage, were maybe leading on strike, leading to the deaths of other people. Just think how Labour would be approaching this.
Yes, 100%. Well, it's interesting that Labour, how they were approaching this when these strikes were happening under the Tories. This was all because of the Tories. Under us, they wouldn't strike. And, of course, they can't stop striking under Labour and are still asking for more money. I think Labour are sort of slowly finding out what it's like, the realities of governing. And unions like the BMA, they're not much bothered whether it's Labour or Tories in power. It just looks a bit more delicious when the Blue Party are in number 10.
I think Labour knew this was always going to happen anyway, and all we hear from them is performative crocodile tears.
Yeah.
In the back rooms, they're probably laughing and joking with them, and that they care as little about patients as the BMA do.
You do wonder. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Another great call from Matt in Cheshire. More from you in a moment. 0344 499 1000. Tricia in Morocco says, ask any gas engineer or plumber if they had a good pay and conditions whilst training, but they're now top earners. The junior doctors need to get a grip. Although Jacqueline says, Ian, where does this £100,000 salary myth come from? These are resident doctors on £39,000. They may get these higher salaries after 20 or 25 years, and they deserve every penny. Yes, I think when we were discussing that with the previous caller was the potential of what these people will be earning. I think many of them can do it much quicker than 20, 25 years. And depending on what arm of medicine you choose to go into, if you suddenly become a partner in a GP practice, your earnings could shoot well over the 100k limit. But I take the point. Jacqueline, thank you for that. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Huey says, I hadn't heard of Red Robbo, so I Googled him. Died aged 90 in 2017. This is true. Scargill is 87, so it looks like being a Pinko trade unionist must be a healthy career choice. Yeah, ripe old ages, aren't they, to live? And I'm sure I saw Scargill on something recently, or maybe I just saw an image of him. And he didn't look like, you know, an inactive person. So time, as Huey rightly says, time is obviously kind to those who demand bigger pay rise. Maybe the BMA head will live to about 150 or something, based solely on that idea. Maybe it's true. Let's move to this story. This is the UK's leading think tank Policy Exchange have said that Britain needs an emergency census after a record 3.9 million influx during the Boris wave, warning that immigration-driven growth will strain housing, services and social cohesion. It's that last point, by the way, that I always think gets almost left out of the discussion, and yet it's so crucial. Boris Johnson's Liberal policies pushed net migration to a record 944,000 in the year to March 2023. We remember it well. Let's get a word from Dr. Rakib Hassan, who is Senior Fellow at the Policy Exchange. Good afternoon to you, Rakib. Always good to get your thoughts on this. I mean, you know, tell us something we didn't know in many respects, but here it is. You guys have done some brilliant work, and there is something in this, isn't there? Because these numbers were so big and continue to overshadow this debate that they've, in effect, they've sort of falsely, well, in fact, our readings of population and requirements and social needs, etc., are out of whack now because of these numbers.
No, absolutely, Ian. And I think that the point to make is that we've witnessed unprecedented levels of immigration-driven population change. Now, you mentioned the figure there between June 2021 to June 2024, largely the result of the liberalisation of post-Brexit visa rules under the Prime Ministership of Boris Johnson. Witnessed the arrival of over 3.9 million migrants in the form of long-term international immigration. And I think that the big point to make here is that we have not witnessed that level of population growth before, that immigration-driven population growth. Yeah. But what's really important to make is that it's even quicker. It's been even larger in certain parts of the country. And I think that's where we really need to have this discussion about the impact it's having on public services, social cohesion, and more generally, the social fabric of our country at large.
And there is, I mean, we talk about these subjects, as you know, Rakib, on a daily basis. There's so many interconnecting issues, whether, you know, language issues, social cohesion, as we were just talking about. The obvious ones are like schools and, you know, the NHS and this sort of area. Housing in particular, I mean, is right up there. But you know, you might think this is so serious that it would sort of be hitting the front pages on a daily basis. It's almost as if we've just got used to this.
No, I think that's a problem. This situation should not be normalised. And I think that a big part of this report, why we're proposing an emergency census specifically for England, because the population growth has been especially large in England compared to the other home nations, is because that we traditionally have a reputation for being a relatively successful multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy. But now that is very much at stake because of recent developments connected to immigration. And I think the important point to make here is that census population data traditionally is used in terms of calculating how tax revenue should be distributed in order to allow for the precise and effective delivery of public services. So a big part of this emergency census is actually looking at where are we most vulnerable when it comes to critical forms of infrastructure where public services simply aren't keeping up with the pace of population change and the kind of strain that can create between different communities in relatively deprived parts of the country.
Indeed. It costs an arm and a leg, of course, to do a census, as we know from the last one. And, of course, there's all sorts of issues around getting the right questions, etc. So is this just a notional idea, or is there a serious push for a recount, if you like, as to who the heck lives here?
Well, I think that the cost point is a very important one, which is why we've recommended a 10% national sample. Now, this was also used in the 1966 mid-decade census, which was held under very similar circumstances. There's public concerns over the scale of Commonwealth migration, but also internal movement between the northern regions to southern England. So if you use a 10% national sample, but you have a select number of what we call special sort of case study areas. So we selected 5 areas: Preston, Middlesbrough, Leicester, my hometown of Luton, and Bournemouth. Then you're able to keep the cost low, but also to have a very comprehensive and insightful reading into how our population has changed in the last few years.
Well, we'll keep an eye on this, because I think most people would agree that there is definitely a need to, revisit numbers for very serious. It's not a mischievous endeavour. This is for very serious and crucial reasons to, the future of how our country runs. While you're with us, I'd love to get your word on this. The Met Police and Greater Manchester Police taking action on placards and chants. We've had some horrendous things happen. We know that the kind of anti-Israel protests, even after the Manchester synagogue attack, took place on that day, on that evening even, just round the corner from where these attacks happened. And similarly, after what happened on Bondi Beach, lots of protests still taking place. Those shouts of globalise, the intifada have happened as well. This is extraordinary stuff, but we're now hearing from 2 large police forces that they may well be cutting down and clamping down on those that wave these placards and shout these slogans.
Well, I think that recent terrorist attacks have very much underscored the reality that Islamist extremism does not only represent the principal terror threat in the UK, it represents the primary global terror threat. And I think, in a way, just going back to the pros of an emergency census, I think one thing that we really need to understand in our own country is particular areas, what we call high-risk areas, which could be defined by worsening forms of religious and cultural segregation, and how that might be contributing towards Islamist extremism. And in those segregated Muslim communities, you have heightened levels of anti-Semitism. So I think that's a very important reason as to why we really need to have an emergency census, really understand how our country has changed, and in some ways certainly not for the better.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that long ago, would it, Ricky, where if you'd have explained to people 15 years ago that we would have these kind of protests on our streets, nobody would have believed you. It would have been extraordinary that we'd have had such, almost rabid, sometimes dangerous, often violent protests, with the most awful things being chanted and written on placards, and getting a free pass while doing so, all for something that is happening in a different part of the world.
Well, for some time I've expressed concerns over anti-Semitic elements of pro-Palestine demonstrations, and I think some of those elements were fundamentally under-policed, especially in the earlier stages of those demonstrations taking place. And on top of that, there was the displaying of pro-terror paraphernalia as well at some of these protests and demonstrations. So I think that what we really need to look at here is that how these protests and demonstrations have actually in some ways weakened the wider pro-Palestine movement, and how it's created an atmosphere of intimidation for British Jewish communities. And I think irrespective of one's position on what is going on in the Middle East, it doesn't justify the kind of lethal anti-Semitic violence that we've witnessed both at home and abroad.
Yeah, spot on. Rakib, thank you for your time, sir. Rakib Hassan, Dr. Rakib Hassan, Senior Fellow with the Policy Exchange. Thank you to him. Calls and comments on the BBC, the NHS, the doctors' strike, what we've just been discussing there. Dav says, just stick the BBC onto YouTube. That would be the answer. Well, yes, it would be in the sense that those that wanted to watch, so Mr. Tumble could just go on. Didn't they put BBC Three online for a period of time, just online? Is that still the case? I'm pretty sure they did, because is BBC Three still going? I'm sure they changed their name to BBC Choice at one point and then something else. And that was widely seen as more of a kind of youth-orientated programming. But it definitely, I'm almost sure it went online at some point, because that's where the future is. You could put it on YouTube. Would it work? It would. Well, if you put only Fours and Horses or the equivalent only on YouTube, it would probably be off the scale. But you've got to be getting ludicrous amounts of people watching you on YouTube in order to make a semblance of money. And if the BBC lobbed University Challenge on YouTube, I don't know, is that a good example? Do you ever sit and watch University Challenge, Finn? So it's on, isn't it? Because the only reason you keep it on is you go, I will answer one of these questions. I will do it. And then you get to the end of it, you go, I didn't actually answer one of these questions. And there's always a sort of weirdy-beardy bloke, isn't there, in a kind of tank top who looks about 58 and you know he's 19 and studying history at Oxford. There's always one of those on there. And a woman that looks like the one with the glasses from Scooby-Doo. There's always, that always happens on University Challenge. For something. Do they cast them in this kind of way? I don't know. Bamber Gascoigne, he was the man that used to present it. Paxman did it for a long time. Now it's that other fella. So, yeah, if you put maybe that would work, I don't know. But if the BBC were doing it to monetise it, until you're hitting the kind of, high millions per episode, it wouldn't be worth their while in doing it, because they wouldn't be making the money it costs to make the programme. There's the problem. You'd be better doing it in the producer's house, because that would probably save on a few costs. But they might look at that model. They might look at the YouTube model. Thank you, Dave, for raising that. But he's not the first person. There's also advertising. There's the idea that you might pay just for the online stuff, which is kind of a similar point, I suppose. So would you pay just for the news? Should they only be the news and focus on accuracy? This from Matt in Newcastle, who says the grammar school system was the best social leveller. We've sort of drifted into talking about why there aren't so many working class people in kind of those big jobs, and like doctors, for example. But Matt says the grammar school system was the best social leveller. Fact, posh kids did not always get their 11 plus, but many working class kids did. That's true. A lot of the ultra posh kids went to private schools, of course, and that sort of ticked the box in that respect. So the grammar school system was sort of a way that working class kids could experience sort of a bit of private school type education in the sense of accelerated learning and the kind of breadth of stuff that might have been thrown at you, the level of homework you might have, all of that stuff. So, but it was never universal, never across the whole country, was it? Grammar schools? No, they do still exist around my neck of the woods. They still exist, but not in many places. This is Anton in York. Back to the doctors, Anton. What are you thinking? Hello.
Hi there. I think the media's got it wrong about the pay rise. Thing. Yes, that is one of the things, but one of the main reasons are the doctors have spent 5 years at university, a hard graft as well, and then they do the F1 and F2, and after that there's no guarantee of the jobs. So they've spent 7 years of their life, and a lot of money obviously, and there's no guarantee of jobs. That was the main concern of the junior doctors, residential doctors I spoke to, that they increased the university places to about 11,000, but they didn't increase the hospital places.
Which is weird, isn't it? And of course you've got this inclusion of foreign...
Hand, left hand, don't know what they're doing.
Foreign trainee doctors also have an in on the NHS, which is extraordinary when our own doctors are somewhat curtailed.
And all they need to do is just pause importing foreign doctors for a period of time, and then let the ones that we've trained here and paid for take the jobs. And then, people are always quoting the consultants. A lot of doctors don't want to be consultants. They're happy just being a doctor on a regular wage, I wrote some notes down. And then, like, when they've done the 5 years university, they do the F1 and F2s. Well, I know for a fact that an F1 doctor, when he's doing a night shift, will have to look after 5 wards on his own or her own, and that's like 125 people on the night shift. The consultants on call, there are nurses there, obviously, but is that right?
Well, that rather begs the wider question, Anton, just beyond this pay rise discussion, as to whether the fundamental change to the NHS, which every politician talks about, is desperately needed. I mean, do they experience this same problem in Germany or France and Spain, similar-sized economies, where they seem to have greater outcomes in their health systems. I'm sure there's loads of complaints about different aspects of all of those countries, but their overall outcomes for sort of heart disease, cancer and that kind of stuff do seem to be better than ours. What do they do that we don't do?
Well, I mean, if you look at the system that they have in the Netherlands, that works a lot better. So to me, they should be looking at that type of system.
But they must look at it. No, when Wes Streeting gets the big job, he must go, right, whatever they're doing there, do it here. And there must be a reason why they can't. I can't think of what reason there is. But surely any any government wants to go, right, get the best system.
What I find with that is, if somebody says we need to do this with the NHS, you get shouted down, oh, you want the American system. Well, we don't want the American system. It needs sorting out. It was good at the time when it came out, but it needs updating from the ground up.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the American system. I don't think anybody would advocate for
like you say, the Netherlands system, when I've looked at that, that looks a lot better system.
Yeah,
and then the other thing people forget is, if we don't have doctors, we just have a big building full of sick people.
Very good point. Listen, Anton, thank you. Anton in York. This comes from Stacey in Wallington. I'm on benefits. This is about the TV licence. I'm on benefits due to illness. I haven't paid a licence since I became ill, a payment I couldn't afford, and there's nothing to watch anymore. Even if I was offered it for free, I wouldn't want it. It would make more sense to give me the free licence back, to give the free licence back to the elderly, as some live alone and don't have smart TVs or even internet to watch Netflix and YouTube, etc. Yeah, good point. Well, it's a classic example, isn't it? Nobody's thinking this through. What we can all, I think, conclude is that the TV licence in its, the TV licence is no longer, it's not fit for purpose. They just don't know what to do about it. And again, he just said, Anton, our last caller, said, well, why don't they look at, with the health service, look at the Netherlands model and go, let's do that. Or look at, the model from another country where they have greater outcomes. You'd think they think about it. Is it just too big? Is that the problem? And again, when you come to the TV licence, nobody can seem to call this. It's £175 a year. If you lobbed off all but one radio station at the BBC, you would literally reduce the cost of the licence based on that one move alone. And then that's before you've started on their God knows how many TV channels they've got these days, and their internet presence, and the BBC Sounds, and the app, and the podcast. I mean, the list goes on. It's quite easy for a good auditor to go in there and say, I'll get this to 50 quid. Be a start, wouldn't it? 0344 499 1000.
And I think we all are. And I think we all know it's going to get worse if this idea of a specific crime against Muslimness comes in. I've been looking at the detail of this. We only have a leak, so I might hold my fire until we have what the government's actually proposing. But it looks like treating Muslims as a special class. Now, I'm going to flag up very, very quickly, Kev, that I'm bisexual, and the left tried to treat us on the letter suit.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Don't go away, Joe in Grimsby with you in just a second. We've got the voice of doom first, the mystery voice of a politician of some kind, left wing, right wing, somewhere in the middle, young, old, dead or alive, up to you. It's a politician, it's a mystery voice. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
And again.
Going to be community relations.
You can message 87222 if you fancy having a crack at that, and we'll tell you who it is after the news at 3, but only if somebody gets it correct. Here it is again.
Going to be community relations.
87222. Back to your calls. Joe in Grimsby. On the doctors, Joe, what are you thinking?
Hello, Ian.
Hiya.
I don't think you can just pay them enough. I'm just an ordinary Joe, and the services...
Quite literally an ordinary Joe.
Literally an ordinary Joe. I've been very, very pleased with the NHS. I've needed them for one thing or another for some many years, and they are a service that I need, that I use, that I want to be good. And when I take my child, God forbid, to an A&E, I want happy nurses. I want happy doctors. I want them to be the best paid. I want every young man in this country to want to be a doctor. They're the people I need. I don't need Wes Streeting. I don't need Keir Starmer. I don't need migrants. I don't need the king. Do you know he's a billionaire? What does he do with his money? I mean...
Buys crowns.
There's enough money floating around in this country. Look at the waste that we've had.
No, I agree. But the NHS, you'd agree, though, Joe, the NHS is not perfect, and overall its outcomes are not as good as they could be. And there are countries around the world that do so much better than us. So, you know, we can't be complacent. We've all got a story of a good experience. I get it.
We can't measure ourselves against other countries. It's this country I'm interested in.
Yeah, but you do measure yourself against other countries. You look at a similar size economy with similar amounts of money going in, maybe funneled in different ways.
Yeah.
But you would naturally, you have to look at other and say, well, why do they do better in Finland?
What do we need from the NHS? What do we need? We need doctors who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
We've constantly got a problem. The government, all they're trying to do any way they can, and which have always done, they've pitted the man against the problem, whether it was the miners or whatever.
But there is a problem. I mean, there is a problem. I mean, for putting aside the doctors' strike, there is a problem with the NHS.
Well, yes, indeed. I won't disagree with that. The poor management, more poor financial management, but have we not got that from the top to the bottom?
Yeah, we have, but we've also not got the best clinical outcomes.
Well, yeah, but I want happy policemen. I want happy doctors. This government, all they want to do is privatise everything. They're running the government, the NHS down.
But they haven't privatised it, and no political party is arguing to privatise it.
Yes, they have. Of course, they have. What is the private medical that they're constantly advertising?
Yeah, you can have. I mean, there are private components to it. You know, every machine that goes ping in a hospital, every pair of rubber gloves, were privately provided and produced, etc.
No, I think you've got me wrong.
I understand what I'm saying is there are private elements.
For your medical care.
Yes, but you do pay for your medical care.
Yeah, but they want you also having an insurance policy.
Who does?
The government.
The government do.
They're trying to run the NHS down.
I've never heard that story.
So that you take out private.
But I've never heard anybody say that.
Well, I'm saying it now, and it's the same with your pension.
But it's not true.
They want you to have private. It's
yeah, of course they would
money
encourage people to, if you can
put
do it
money
private.
in the money markets.
Well, it takes money. It takes money. It takes the strain off the system. Of course, that would be the prime argument one would assume for it. But I'm not aware of any kind of bottom drawer plan that we'll just try and privatise. We'll do it that way. Clearly, it takes the strain off. But I tell you what, in the grander scale, Joe, I bet it doesn't even touch the sides. Listen, we stop there because the news is upon us. That is Joe in Grimsby. Your thoughts on what he just said. We'll have more calls from you in a few moments' time. The numbers to get in touch: 0344 499 1000. And if you are messaging in, it's 87222. That's the one you'll need. If you want to have a crack at the voice of doom, it's the mystery voice. Have a listen.
Going to be community relations.
If we get a correct answer, we'll tell you who it is after the headlines at 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, welcome back. Lots to get through. We are, of course, responding to the doctor's strike. Began this morning, 7 a.m, 20,000 walking out, 83% voted for it. But, of course, the disruption is there to be seen. And it comes against the backdrop of super flu, which is already causing a lot of jip at most hospitals. This doesn't help. The government have put the cost of these strikes at £250 million. Do you support the doctors? More calls from you on the way. Also, the Metropolitan Police and Greater Manchester Police have said in a joint statement that they will toughen up policing after the Australian Hanukkah and Heaton Park attacks. Arrests may follow, particularly with unsavoury placards and chants of "globalise the intifada." Process conditions will apply near synagogues, and patrols and investigations are being intensified. I think most people would support that. Some people would go further and say, well, why is anyone chanting some of this stuff? How is that even allowed? Doesn't that spill from the right to protest into a public order offence? We'll have more on that story too. And a leading think tank have said that Britain needs an emergency census. This comes on the back of those extraordinary numbers of a record 3.9 million migrants that came over during the Boris wave of immigration. The think tank warns that immigration-driven growth will strain housing services and social cohesion. And it's worth a reminder that in just 1 year, Boris Johnson's policies pushed net migration to a record 944,000 back in March 2023. We'll have more on that as well. And let's go to this story as well. Whole life sentences will be extended to revenge killings of current or former police officers, plus prison and probation officers too. David Lammy has stated that murderers targeting officers because of their jobs will likely face the toughest of jail terms. Shortly we'll speak to Simon Spence, KC. But first, Brian Booth is Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation. Afternoon to you, Brian.
Afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. Always good to see you. I mean, obviously, the Federation have campaigned for a long time about having, reflective sentencing for assaults on police. Naturally, it's been woeful in the past. Sometimes it still staggers us when we see a decision made or a decision not made. Often doesn't even get past the CPS on some occasions. Every copper knows a kick in the shins or being spat at is something they rarely even report because it can happen so regularly. But, of course, the real serious stuff, the killing of cops, that is, clearly in another territory here. What's your response and what's the Federation's response to what Mr Lammy, the Justice Secretary, is apparently proposing here?
It's excellent news and long overdue. I think it covers a bit of a loophole because if you remember the sad death of Andrew Harper from Thames Valley Police, Harper's Law was brought in to look at those who kill police officers on duty and make sure they receive proper justice, which we believe is a whole life sentence. But we met with Dr. Kieran Mullen on Monday, and he highlighted actually an area in the law which is a bit of an anomaly where he's representing or been campaigning for the family of Lenny Scott, who was a prison officer. He was deliberately targeted by a prisoner after an incident in prison, and he was shot dead outside his gym last year.
Yes.
He left the prison service so many years before. So this is to try and get that loophole also of if officers or prison officers or those protectors of our society get targeted outside of their careers when they've left policing or the prison service. I think it's an absolutely excellent move forward.
Indeed. I've stood alongside you, Brian, when, at conferences and awards where the fallen have been remembered. The stories are always troubling. It never gets easy to hear those stories. Clearly, some officers are lost, due to accidents, but so many lose their lives just doing the job they were paid to do, walked out the door at 9 in the morning to go on shift and never came back. There are very few, if any, jobs anywhere where that is the daily risk you face.
Yeah, and if you sadly read the Roll of Honour Trust, they have a document that published wherever any officer that loses their life in their duty, it's published in that document, and you read through it and it goes on and on. It's horrendous, but they are recognised by the Police Federation.
Yeah, and this David Lammy proposal, I mean, when politicians propose something, you often wait about 18 years for something to happen. It's like turning an oil tanker around, trying to get things into action. But how hopeful are you that this is little more than just a kind of light suggestion?
It's really refreshing to see that this is getting cross-party support. As I mentioned, the Shadow Justice Minister, Dr. Kieran Mullen, he's behind this, so it's great to see that the Labour Party and the Conservatives are working together for such a great campaign. So I think if it does get cross-party support, I think we know it will be delivered.
We hope so. Brian, great to see you again. Thank you for your time. Brian Booth is the Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation. Let's speak with Simon Spence, KC, criminal barrister with Red Lion Chambers. Afternoon to you, Simon.
Good afternoon.
A case such as this, or a story such as this, rather, where somebody suggests, look, there should be a very specific sentence based on the profession, in this case, police officers, and to prison and even probation officers as well, those that are in a very precarious place by definition of their job. Would there be any legal argument against this?
I don't think there will be on the extension that the government's talking about at the moment. I think the first point to make is that under the Sentencing Act of 2020, the imposition of a whole life order for the murder of a police officer or a prison officer whilst on duty is already enshrined in law, and that's the default position. The extension, as I understand it, is that if somebody has retired or left the police or the prison service, but is targeted because of the job they previously had, then the whole life order is going to be extended to that. It seems to me that's an entirely sensible extension of the use of a whole life order.
Yeah, and Brian, our previous guest, alluded to the prison officer that was murdered after he'd left the profession.
That's right. I think the slightly more tricky area is where, for example, somebody gets into a fight on a Friday or Saturday night and kills somebody who happens to be an off-duty prison officer or police officer, but they didn't know that.
Yeah.
Whether that should apply in those circumstances. My understanding is that is not what the government is proposing. And it seems to me what is being suggested, which I have to say is an extension to the sentencing bill that was introduced by the last government. I mean, this sentencing bill has been hanging around in Parliament for a very, very long time. And so I share Brian's view that it really needs to be enacted and brought into force as quickly as possible.
Well, in your profession, which sort of ties in, I mentioned the sort of the analogy of turning an oil tanker around. You know, we hear lots of policies mentioned every now and again. Some, you know, an MP appears on Question Time or something, and they come up with a bright idea. You think, well, that's a fantastic idea. It doesn't see the light of day for 2 decades. And you think, how long can it take to employ a bit of common sense? And of course, the world of law is absolutely drowning at the moment in cases and backlogs and shortages of court time, magistrates, Crown, you name it. I mean, it's like wherever you look in your labyrinthine world of the legal system, there seems to be a lot of problems at the moment.
Well, there are massive problems. And, you know, obviously we're all still wrestling with the government's proposals to limit very considerably jury trials in an effort to reduce the backlog. But I'm afraid the sense of urgency is just not there. Mr. Lammy said today that the courts bill isn't going to be introduced until the spring. He doesn't expect it to be passed, assuming it passes at all, through Parliament until the end of 2026. And so we face another 12 months of the backlog growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
And the Leveson Review...
Sorry, do continue.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the Leveson Review was set up to report urgently about 18 months ago. And so we're talking about potentially 2.5 years before any changes are actually implemented.
And we kind of live in this very grim reality at the moment where people are waiting years for cases. Pencil in for 2030. I mean, imagine going to your initial hearing and discovering, yes, we're going to hear your case and it's going to go ahead and it'll be on, you know, July the 15th, 2030. I mean, 5 years from now. I mean, all sorts of things happen in that time. You know far better than I do. You know, people's memories wane. They're even their decision to give evidence can change as well. I mean, all sorts of things can happen. That's surely, Brian, unacceptable. Simon, I apologise. Unacceptable in the 21st century that people are waiting 5 years for justice.
Absolutely. And giving evidence for the Justice Select Committee yesterday, David Lammy said that he considered 2 years' wait was an acceptable period of time for rape cases.
Yeah.
I mean, that is simply, I'm afraid, not acceptable from any perspective. You know, if you're a complainant who is alleging that you've been raped, being told you've got to wait 2 years. If you're a defendant, and of course a lot of people charged with serious sexual offences are remanded in custody, the custody time limits envisage your trial taking place within 6 months.
Yeah.
And so if you're saying 2 years, that's 4 times the amount of time that Parliament says you should remain in custody unconvicted. And yet, I was looking at some statistics today. People may not realise, but the government sets caps on the number of days a year that the Crown Courts can sit. So today, for example, 75 courtrooms, which could be available, aren't sitting. That's 15% of the national total. Yesterday, it was 64. On Monday, it was 60. So that's 199 sitting days nationally in 3 days. And let's say an average rape case takes 5 days, which in my experience is about right. That's 40 cases that could have been tried in 3 days.
Yeah. And of course, rape is, for obvious reasons, a very specific area where, you know, time is sort of the essence, not just emotionally and morally and all the rest of it, but in terms of evidence.
It is. It's in a special category, but any case where the delay is as long as it is, and of course the cases you were talking about going off to 2030 are the low priority cases. They're not particularly serious offences. The defendant's on bail. But nevertheless, the risk of people falling out of the system, losing interest, failing to engage, it's all there.
Of course it is. And Simon, what are the reasons? You mentioned, you know, the sitting days and the amount of days where courts are just dark during that time. What's the reason for that? Is there a logistical reason? Is there something we don't know? Is there, does something special happen if you sit too often in a courtroom? Is there some old sort of medieval law?
No, it's a very simple answer. It's purely financial. But the cost of reopening those courts will be a fraction of the cost of the changes the government is talking about introducing. And that is something they could switch overnight and just say, we're lifting the cap. We'll have the courts sitting at maximum capacity. And that is what we as a profession have been urging, not just this government, but the previous government to do for the last 3-4 years.
Yeah. Is there, we've been talking also about the NHS today and simply the size of it. And there's sort of analogous moments, I guess, within how big systems are run. And a previous caller was citing the Netherlands, where they have greater outcomes of health and things seem to tick along slightly more efficiently with greater outcomes than this country. Is there a country when it comes to the world of law, Simon, that you and your colleagues look to and go, look what they're doing over there, look at Luxembourg or wherever, where they haven't got this problem? In Luxembourg, about 7 people live there, so maybe not the best example, but, you know, areas of life where you look at different countries and think they actually have a really good system and this is the reason why. Is there any way you could point to that does it better and we should emulate?
I think that the problem is you can't really compare. Most of the European countries don't have the adversarial system, as it's called, where you have prosecution and defence, a presumption of innocence, and the prosecution have to prove someone's guilt. That is what we have had since the 13th century, and it's what has been exported, if you like, to the Empire and now the Commonwealth, and indeed to the United States and Canada. They have changed some of their systems, whether they're for the better or worse, I don't know. A few years ago, I went to an advocacy course in Florida, and I was talking to the lawyers there about their conviction rates, bearing in mind they have jury selection and all this sort of thing, which we don't. And our conviction rates, I think, were about 3% different. So I do wonder whether actually any of the changes that are being proposed are going to improve things. But alienating the general public from the criminal justice system by removing trial by jury, I think, is a massively retrograde step.
Yeah.
And when the government says it's necessary to clear the backlog, just look at those statistics I've given you of 199 sitting days lost in 3 days.
Yeah, we can't seem to speak to any lawyer, prosecutor, defender, whatever, who thinks this is a good idea. In fact, I don't think I've spoken to anybody within the world of law that thinks it's a good idea.
Well, I think there are some minor changes that could be made in relation to some of the very minor offences. But by and large, for sentences of up to 3 years, which are quite serious offences, to remove those from juries, I think is something that, as a profession, and I suspect the public at large, are united in their opposition to.
Yeah.
And I think the government probably needs to start listening a bit harder.
That is always the mantra, isn't it? The government need to listen a little harder. Let's hope they do. Simon, great to have you on, sir. Thank you. We will speak again, I'm sure. Simon Spence, KC. He's a criminal barrister with Red Lion Chambers. And interesting, we weren't specifically talking about jury stuff there, but yet again, he just echoed what every single barrister and solicitor, lawyer we've spoken to over the last few weeks on the jury system about the idea of getting rid of it is an absolute horror show, as far as most people are concerned, in terms of the authenticity of our legal system. We'll take some calls on that if you want to comment. We've also got the Voice of Doom. Have we got a winner, though, on the Voice of Doom? Let me remind you of the voice we played you. This is day 3, by the way, of the voice. Here it is.
Going to be community relations.
These are some of the guesses. Katie Lamb, Maggie Chapman, Miata Fanbulla, no. None of those. Priti Patel, no. Ed Davey, after getting hit in the ghoulies while running around on his hobby horse, no. Nikki was brilliant. Nikki Morgan, no. Bridget Phillipson, no. We haven't got a winner. It rolls over to... Actually, I'm not here tomorrow, so Friday it returns for day 4. 20 past 3 now. This is Talk.
And I think we all are. And I think we all know it's going to get worse if this idea of a specific crime against Muslimness comes in. I've been looking at the detail of this. We only have a leak, so I might hold my fire until we have what the government's actually proposing. But it looks like treating Muslims as a special class. Now, I'm going to flag up very, very quickly, Kev, that I'm bisexual, and the left tried to treat us on the letter suit.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back to more of your calls and comments. Got a load of stuff going on here. Glenn in Colchester says, disgusted by the Met and Manchester police forces, they've now admitted what we've known all along. The legislation has always been there to stop the anti-Semitic rants and terrorist flag waving. They've simply now got new guidance, not new laws, following Bondi. Bigger question, though, is who is giving them this guidance and pulling their strings, says Glenn in Colchester. It's a really good point. There's no doubt about it, and I don't know whether this comes from high up. I mean, often when people go, oh, it comes from the top, it's rigged from down here. I promise you, it rarely hasn't been the case. You'd think it might be. Our politicians aren't that good. So where it comes from is usually based on Will we create a bigger problem if we intervene, which is why you've seen a lot of those Palestinians? Are we going to get a race riot on the case if we start suddenly? We've got 30,000 people, a percentage of them are shouting really unsavoury, horrid stuff on megaphones and on placards and goodness knows what else. But we on balance, we are better to watch video footage afterwards, see the real bad ones and then arrest them, rather than arrest them at the time, which causes a bigger problem. I don't think they afford that same wiggle room to all protests, and that's where I think that's kind of the point that Glenn is making. You know, why you could have, this was already, you know, to shout anti-Semitic racist stuff is already an offence. So why now? John's in Dorset on the TV licence. What have you got for us, John? Afternoon to you.
Yes, Ian, good afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, I worked in North Carolina for 3 years as a nurse in trauma centre. And over there, their public service equivalent is National Public Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Now, basically, the main funding is from donations, listener donations, which is the biggest chunk. They get about 1% from the state for a corporation for public broadcasting.
Right.
And most of their stuff is actually sponsored by universities, academic institutions.
Got it.
And they have about 1,000 public radio stations who buy content from them. And if you look at Discovery sometimes, some of the content from NPR is actually good value stuff in terms of its quality and, you know,
Sure.
its accuracy. So basically, companies can sponsor program, but they don't actually do they don't do any hard selling. It's a sort of what they call underwriting credits. So if a company is a bit dodgy about it, they almost whisper it, but they get their sponsorship from companies, universities, and
interesting.
And then basically Ford, MacArthur, Gates, they all fund specific projects. And then there's the Magic Week, and if you want to listen to woke stuff, and they're not woke. I mean, I think that they are how the BBC ought to be. They're responsible, they're polite, and they see themselves as part of a publicly subsidized ecosystem, and it measures the quality of their output. So essentially, they'll have a week when people will send in the funding. So somebody, you know, I'm sitting here in Rocky Mount, and y'all are going to get $500. And everybody contributes to it.
Yeah.
So basically, that's the way it is.
And of course, you don't have to contribute, but it seems to work and has done for many years.
Well, indeed, if you put crap on the airwaves, people won't buy it, and the Americans are. And basically, if there's anything that does tie it down ideologically, it's foundation funding, and they're cautious about the foundation funding.
Sure. Do you think the BBC could do something similar?
They could if they had the willpower.
Yeah.
But you see, there are no big performers on NPR. You've got academics, but academics who aren't sort of roped into this progressive scheme. I mean, some of their academics are really very good people, and they in terms of culture and
got it.
You know, they knock the BBC into a cocked hat, and but they see themselves essentially as credible as long as the public regards them as credible. And even the people who want to sort of push a bit of ideology, they're quite limited as to what they can do. They don't do any sort of protest programs, and the idea that they would actually edit content to slant it one way or another, that would be death to them. Not just because of the financial implications, but they see themselves as a credible journalist organisation, and you just don't do it.
You just don't do it. Yeah, I wonder whether, I mean, the BBC have got to look at another way. They've got no choice here. It might not happen in the next 5 years, but it's going to happen. And, you know, the case of defending the licence fee, people might defend the BBC, but defending the way of paying it, there's no longer a case there, right, John? I mean, there's no way anybody can say that this is still fit for purpose.
I'm an 81-year-old veteran, and I've served the army, and I've served nursing for 49 years. And the idea that I know some people down the road, they'll be queuing up for the free licence. I've stopped paying mine. I mean, they can send me to jail. I can do an open university degree and probably take up the arts. And
that's right. You have an easy life with 3 meals a day.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's got to stop somewhere.
Indeed.
That's why, after 54 years as a Conservative, I've joined Reform.
There you go. You see, you're not the only one that's done that, John, that's for sure. Thank you, John in Dorset. Really appreciate that. Let's go to Charlie in East Sussex on TV licence. What do we do, Charlie? What's the future? How do we sort this darn thing out?
Oh, what's the future? If only I had a crystal ball. And do you know what? I despair sometimes the more I listen to what's going on. And the more I'm thinking, no, I'm sure I couldn't be hearing this. But free licenses to those people on benefits. And I'm just thinking to myself, no. Have the government really got this so wrong with the present mood of the country at the moment? And it's absolutely mind-boggling that they are so far away from, the average guy in the street. I don't want to say the alarm clock Britain, but the average guy or girl that's going out to work, trying to pay their way. I mean, I had my water bill through, Ian, and that's gone up by over £100 just for this bill. I pay it bi-yearly.
Yeah.
So over the course of the year, it's gone up over £200. And I'm thinking to myself, are the government that stupid that they're, with everything that's going on with the BBC, they're now talking about free licenses for people? And I'm going, no, I must be living in a parallel world. I'm surely.
I think you might be right. I mean, there's another way to look at it, I suppose, Charlie, because, of course, if they suddenly give these licenses free, does that mean the government will pay it to the BBC budget on their behalf? Or does it mean the BBC just won't get that money?
But no, of course, it's not the BBC won't get the money. The government will pay it out of the public purse. And I'll never call it, I'll never say the government are paying it, because it's our money. So we'll be paying it. The average bloke in the street who's working, who goes in and tries to buy a tin of beans and it's gone up by 20p, that guy, that's the guy that's going to be paying for it, because that's the guy that's paying for everything. Yeah. And I'm sorry, and it's got to the point now. I mean, my son has emigrated to Canada, and do you know what? It breaks my heart. I've had a little baby over there. It breaks my heart that I can't see them all the time.
Yeah.
But my God, fair play to him, because this place now, under this government, it's mental.
Yeah.
It is mental, Ian.
Yeah.
And that's all I want to say on the subject.
No, you said it brilliantly as well, and with nice emphasis there at the end. Charlie, thank you. Charlie in East Sussex. Gary says, BBC licence, just get rid of BBC 3, 4, BBC's 1 to 2 were great before the other two came along. 3 and 4 have done, all they've done is dilute 1 and 2. They could save money on programming, making programme money and the licence. And I don't know this. I would imagine when they did all that expansion to, there was BBC 3, BBC 4, I don't think there was a TV 5, was there? But then there was other sort of TV endeavours. I think they did that to sound like more value for money. So, look, you're getting much, much more. All these channels, much, much more. Where else would you get all of this? But in doing so, Gary's completely correct to identify what you end up doing is kind of diluting stuff. And how much good quality is there? If the BBC make a really good quality programme, whether it's your cup of tea or not, I was trying to think of the example that was being given a couple of weeks ago. So some real hit they had that did, they've got a few of those. What's the big cop programme that's coming back that was really, everybody watched it apart from me, it seems. What's it called? Police programme. Proper, like, everybody watched it. Was there a character called H in it or something? Was that like the big twist? I can't remember. Never. Line of Duty, that thing, yeah. That kind of stuff. And then on the light entertainment side, they got the Strictly stuff and all of that. If they had sort of 30 of those, 30 absolute guaranteed, complete, nailed-on hits, then you could sort of take them seriously in one respect and say, well, that would be a model that people might just pay for. Because people pay for Netflix and Disney, and let's be honest, you spend half your evening searching Netflix, looking for something and never do find anything new. Most of Netflix comes because somebody you work with, they've gone, have you seen this? This is great. And you watch it and you buy into it. The kind of heady days, it seems, have already gone for some of those streaming services. On doctors, Angela says, I have a relative, a doctor, who graduated from Cambridge, now living in London. There were 75 people who applied for the job she wanted. She got it, luckily. However, the 12 who graduated with her have not got a permanent job. Some are now locums. That's the main issue, not the money. Thank you, Angela, for that. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Mike says, I don't watch the BBC as I don't agree with their distorted left-wing woke version of the news. When it comes to Strictly Come Dancing, I have two left feet. Maybe they should rename it Strictly Showing Off. I like horse racing, which the Beeb abandoned years ago, and have no interest in tennis. Can you imagine the uproar there would be if they broadcast back-to-back racing on two channels, as they do Wimbledon fortnight? But yeah, I think they got out, because there was always the argument with sporting events that the BBC have no right to be throwing large amounts of money into, you know, which is why they've been massively compromised on football and essentially only really get match of the day and, you know, a World Cup or a European competition in there as well. But, you know, the leagues, that's all gone to the commercial sector, and rightly so. You can't have the BBC spending, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds so that they can show 17 football matches over the course of a season. I mean, that's just not value for money. But there's so many other areas that aren't value. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if they expand and make it look like more value for money, hence why they've got all those radio stations and all those TV stations, and the internet stuff and the podcast thing, the BBC Sound, if they do that, they're criticised. If they reduce it, then the argument will become, well, what's the point if you reduce it? Is there a happy medium for the BBC? How else could they finance it? Would people actually pay for it? Would people, if you had to, you know, you had a choice, it's going to cost you £5 a month to watch the BBC, would they? If it was commercialised, and here's another interesting fact, if it was commercialised, then the commercial world would actually have a problem, because it would instantly, in some areas, obliterate things like music stations, you know, Radio 2, those kind of things, would absolutely damage, like to many irreparably, the commercial music sector. I mean, that wouldn't be the case forever. It would balance up at some point, one would assume. But certainly in the initial hit, there'd be a problem. Things like Strictly Come Dancing would hoover up all the sponsorship money that most people had available to them. So on the other side, they'll be getting nowhere. We put it all in Strictly. It's got the biggest audience. You get the idea. 0344 499 1000. Now, more men are turning to weight loss jabs like Mounjaro, with orders shifting from 90% women, 10% men to 60-40. This is according to Chemist for You. It seems the treadmill and a jog around the block are no longer the options. Paul Gatley is the CEO of Obesity UK. Paul, good afternoon to you. I mean, the argument I hear from everybody who's on these jabs, and a lot of people don't tend to hide it now, it's not even a guilty secret. It's, oh, yeah, I'm doing the jabs, and is that, well, I'll use the jabs to get to a certain weight, and then when I get to that weight, I'll go, oh, look, I can look fantastic. Then I'll stop taking them, and then I can control my weight. I'm sure you've heard that many, many times as well. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I suppose there's a couple of points in that. So more men are reaching out for help, which is absolutely right. More men are living with obesity in the UK than women. So the fact that men are reaching out for that help is really important. The fact that there's less of a stigma, I think, is really important. We don't have a stigma having statins or other things for heart disease. So why would we have stigma around medications for obesity? But I think that whole point about what does it mean? Well, unfortunately, it's not a short-term fix. People will lose weight, but once they stop, the weight comes back on. Now, if people can have the wraparound care, put in the diet, put in the lifestyle, and then stick to it the rest of their life, then it's a good combination. But there's a big if there, because they could spend a lot of money, get a result, but then put the weight back on, just like the Atkins diet did 20 years ago and diets that have been gone before.
Is there a reason why more men are obese than women?
Not really. I mean, I guess the proportion between men and women is not that different, to be honest. But certainly there are more men that live with obesity than women. So, but reasons to why it's, you're splitting hairs between males and females at a population level, really.
And in terms of, the bit that always confuses me about obesity, Paul, and I'm sure likewise, everybody has the same head-scratching moment, is that we live in a world where there's never been more gyms, there's never been more advice about keeping fit, magazines online showing beautiful buff bodies looking fantastic, all sorts of articles in the Mail online telling you how to look incredible in 10 days. So much information, and yet that information and that, some would say, education has coincided with an obesity crisis.
Well, a lot of that is nonsense. That's the first thing to say. So,
sure.
So, in a sense, anyone that's reading 80% of that is a marketing man's dream, basically. So that's part of the problem, that a lot of the information that's out there is not good information. And unfortunately, it's an area that's not regulated. The fact that weight loss medications are regulated and really should have a doctor prescribing them shows that they work and they can work. But fundamentally, there's a lot of false promise out there, and that's what we really need to also eradicate.
Yeah, indeed. Paul, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Paul Gately, CEO of Obesity UK. And of course, there's also the whole celebrity thing. I'm sure I haven't seen Lorraine for a long time, or this morning, but I'm pretty sure that those programmes, they love a weight loss story, don't they? That sort of miracle kind of exercise regime, the celebrity. Who's that woman from Towie? Gemma Collins. Remember her? I mean, you can't really work. 1 minute Gemma is the size of a house, and the next minute she looks like a flipping pipe cleaner, and then half an hour later she's gone housebound again, and then she's back to the pipe cleaner. And I understand. People struggle with it. I don't really struggle with weight issues. People look at me and their first thought is, wow, he's a bit tasty. I get it. However, I know it's a problem that the nation does suffer from in many respects. There is the simple answer. Don't eat as many pies and, walk half an hour once a day, and you won't have a weight problem. But we eat for different reasons. Is it snacking? Is that the big problem? Is it the ability to snack that's never been easier, and the proliferation of, takeaway and fast food places where you can't move without, you think to yourself, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to cook myself a really nice, I'll go vegetarian. I'll get a piece of fish and I'll have some, maybe some nice beans and pulses with it, throw on a few tomatoes, and that'll be a lovely, healthy meal for the evening. I can sit down and, watch the TV with my healthy dinner and have some water. And then you get off the bus and you walk past a chicken shop and you go, sod the fish, I'll just have a bucket of chicken. That's what happens, isn't it? Essentially, because so much, I haven't got to cook. It's brilliant. I'll take my bucket of chicken home. It's my chicken. And away you go. No one's having your chicken. And you can sit there on the sofa, still watching your TV programmes, munching on a leg of beautiful southern fried chook. And that is one of the problems. We've all got a bit, we all know how to not be fat, but half the nation is, and clinically obese. And of course, the problems with this aren't just about your own, because nobody wants to be big. A friend of mine, oddly, we mentioned BBC Three earlier, didn't we? Ricky Grover, a comedian, and Ricky used to be on EastEnders and stuff. He was a big lad, and he did a programme for BBC Three about losing weight. And he said to me, and I think he must have said it in the programme, he said, nobody this size wants to be this size. Some people think you want to be this size. And I remember him saying, if you ask a kid, draw a picture of a lazy person, they will nearly always draw a picture of a lazy, fat person, because that's how the brain kind of associates it. You could be overweight and, amazingly industrious, and not lazy at all. But it's all of that you do. So nobody wants it. We all know how to not be fat, but it's the bit in the middle, like making sure you adhere to a diet and a bit of exercise. Because as sure as night follows day, if you've ever cut out bread for, a week, just cut out bread for a week and watch the pounds drop off. Every day of the week that will happen. Just one thing, just bread. And if you walk for 30 minutes a day, then you've got it covered, frankly. I know different bodies have, different requirements, but you take the broader... But we know this. Me saying this now is not news to anyone. Back to your calls on doctors. Nick is in Northampton. What have you got for us, Nick? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Well, I was saying to the researcher, earlier in the year, I got rushed into hospital, suffered with asthma, couldn't breathe, so I went into hospital. First doctor I see, it's a virus because you haven't used your inhaler right.
Right.
I told them where to get off because I've been doing it since I was 16. I'm now 60.
You didn't need inhaler training.
Yeah, so it's like that. But the nurse, when I got to a ward, she knew more about it than the doctor did.
Yeah, so
I saw
often.
the doctor for the whole week. I saw the doctor for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No, they don't deserve the money. The nurses do. The doctors don't. That's my opinion.
That's interesting. So more money towards the nurses. Nick, thank you very much indeed. I hope the asthma is under control now as well. Becca says, if we have to pay for a TV licence and the rest of the world can watch for free, then I want Americans to pay for my Netflix to even it out. Yes, maybe they would. I mean, if you've got the full kit, if you've got all of Sky, if you've got all of, what are the other British ones? What used to be BT, BT, all of BT, Virgin stuff. If you've got all of those packages and you've got Netflix, Disney, Apple, Paramount, Amazon, and I'm bound to have forgotten a couple in there as well. Yeah, I mentioned Disney. If you've got all of those and all the other, and I tell you what, I bet there's some houses got the full works. Now, yeah, I mentioned Apple, now. Yeah, now's another. If you've got all of that going on, you're probably paying about $1,000 a month to watch the telly. I mean, it'd be insanity. No, you'd probably be paying a good... If you had all the sports packages from all of those domestic ones as well, you'd be paying, without doubt, a couple of £100 a month, and then you throw in your streaming services like Netflix and Disney. Oh, anybody do the whole lot? Love to hear from you. 87222 if you go the whole gamut. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
And I think we all are. And I think we all know it's going to get worse if this idea of a specific crime against Muslimness comes in. I've been looking at the detail of this. We only have a leak, so I might hold my fire until we have what the government's actually proposing. But it looks like treating Muslims as a special class. Now, I'm going to flag up very, very quickly, Kev, that I'm bisexual, and the left tried to treat us on the letter suit.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. One from Mike, who's in... Oh, no, I did Mike's in Wiltshire, didn't I? Yeah, I did. That was about the BBC. This one from Lash, who says, if we want to keep the costs of a census low, then maybe we should ask Amazon, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter for all their data on the people who live here. I'm sure they have very detailed files on our demographics, habits, locations, attitudes. Or just ask Bob from Arbroath. We all know he knows everything. Oh, Bob, he's got a database of the entire country. Knows exactly how it's all going on. This one from David in the Cotswolds. Afternoon, Ian. The country feels less of a country and more like a giant benefit system and a humongous failed healthcare system with a bit of land attached to it. On the BBC, how ridiculous is it for it to be a criminal offence to not pay one organisation to watch any live television they haven't made or broadcast? Surely demanding money to watch someone else's creative endeavours is profiteering. That's true. Because that's the issue, isn't it? Doesn't matter. If you're watching live TV, you still have to pay the TV licence. On this same point, Richard is in Plymouth. What have you got for us, Richard? Afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, Richard Plymouth. Yeah, I was just saying that surely this is nothing but buying votes. Because if you don't pay a TV licence, or you don't have to, you're £4 a week. So who's going to vote for Labour if we're going to say get £4 a week?
Would they vote for Labour just because you got a free TV licence?
Well, it's not free. You say you're getting £4 a week because it's going up to 208, isn't it?
£208?
Yeah, it's going up. So they're going to pay you £4 a week to vote Labour.
Yeah, but who's going to take that?
But believe me, they will.
Well, when it comes to the election and the country's falling apart around you and you go to the ballot box to vote, Richard, is someone going to go, well, I was going to vote for reform, but actually I'll get a free TV licence, £4 a week, I'll vote for Labour?
These people are living on benefits and Labour are supporting them.
Yeah. I've not heard about the licence.
Change the benefit system.
Yeah.
So they're on the verge anyway, and this is an extra £4 a week.
Well, maybe that is it. It's a sweetener for the elections. I don't know how successful that would be. Richard, thank you very much indeed for that. There are some political parties I'm pretty sure would absolutely abolish the licence in its current form. What do you do with it? There's 20-odd thousand people work for the BBC. Probably, I don't know if that's globally or domestically. It is so big. It's funny, I was thinking when I was on the dog walk yesterday, and my first foray into radio was commercial, and then I nipped over to the local BBC station after about 4 or 5 years, and I think it was a 6-month stint. I think it was 6 months and 6 days. It was something curious like that, and it was I learnt quite a lot. Journalistically, I learnt quite a lot, but I hated it. I really did. I didn't like it. I worked with some great people. I liked all of that. I was thinking yesterday on the dog walk, there are lifers at the BBC. There are people who still work at that station that I worked at now. When I first started, they were new at the same time, so we were all kind of similar age. And local journalists that haven't got the ambition or desire to go and work on the national scene, I think sometimes there's a bit of a risk factor in that. Some people quite like the local thing. They like local news, and they like working near where they live and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. And some of these guys were some of the best journalists I've ever worked with, and they were brilliant and remain so. But I was trying to think, it crossed my mind when I was walking the dog yesterday evening. I can't any longer see the purpose, really, of some of those local stations. And they've tried to amalgamate them, and they broadcast at certain times when 3 or 4 stations come together. So they've done all of that, and there's only one direction of travel for that. But the local news thing is really tricky. I found it tricky when I was there the first time, and I went back there for less than a year for a second visit before I came here. I know why I did it. I did it for a whole load of other, nothing to do with career or radio. I had sort of like family reasons why I did it. But I don't know that when it comes to that local news thing, it's really tricky, because if there's a big news story of the day, if something happens as happened in Australia, the idea that you come on air and your main headline is the new building of a housing estate in Swanley, it's very hard to feel newsy when you know there's a load of bigger stuff out there that's more important, even if it's not local. So there's a purpose for it, there's a community thing for it, but given the sort of world we live in now, it's even harder to sort of justify that local thing. But I get and for those who love it and there is an age connection to it, I get it. They love it and they, would not want to change it. Let's get a brief word from Mark in Glasgow. We've not got long, Mark, but I'm sure you can do it. BBC, what are your thoughts? Fire away.
Well, BBC going to local radio, I just don't see the point. Independent local radio is everywhere, and they struggle for that little extra market share, and the BBC no longer fills a gap there. So I don't see the point. Well, the reason I was getting in touch, Ian, was because you had an announcement on the ticker beneath, Lisa Nandy looks at plans to give benefit claimants free TV licenses.
Yeah.
And forgive me, but since one of your, I think it was Alex, about 4 months ago, started talking about the Fabian Society, and I've been checking rigorously since then, every member of the cabinet is now a member of the Fabian Society. And if people care to look up the Fabian Society, they will realise that they are not Labour, they are globalist socialists, which is a bit of a mouthful.
Although, it's I was about to say, in fairness, I mean, a Labour politician, councillor or MP joining the Fabian Society, like an actor joining Equity, it kind of goes with the territory.
Well, I'm not so sure that is the case, but when they do have a very different agenda to Labour, that's the point.
Yeah, they also run by one man and a dog and an armchair in his house.
Well, I was watching the BBC Parliament Live earlier on, and I had Alison McGovern on, Nick Thomas Simmons on, and the stuff they were spouting, I thought, my God, and I actually looked them up, and I thought, here we go, Fabian Society, Lisa Nandy, Fabian Society, all of Starmer's cabinet, and plus Blair Brown and so on, Fabian Society. Yeah. And being quite honest with you, the aims of the Fabian Society, which is global socialism led by political elites, is completely different to what the Labour Party is meant to be there for. And I do think they need to declare themselves as the Fabian Society.
Yeah, but I think that would be, if it had teeth, I would get that. But I know what you're saying, and I don't... Listen, Mark, thank you very much indeed. It's a bit like most Labour MPs are also members of unions as well. I know Alex did it, as he just alluded to there, did a big old rant on the Fabian Society, which I should say, I know it's very exciting, but it's literally run by a bloke with a pipe in a council house in Scunthorpe. So, I don't know what teeth it's really... Like, Labour MPs join the Fabian Society like actors join Equity. It's in that kind of... It's like what you do.